talk to Grandma, Miss Helen Hollies. Do you mind?
Sophie asked timidly as she crept up behind me. Cliff looked to me as if he were asking for help. Ellen Eyes lifted herself up and nodded at me. I nodded back. At that, Cliff stood up and left the room.
Thanks, Rudy.
Sophie smiled softly before heading inside. Cliff and I headed down the stairs together. He looked anxious.
Are those two going to be okay?
If they aren't, we just have to be there for them afterward. I replied as we made our way to the ground floor. When we arrived, Ariel and her lot had just finished their preparations to depart. The two attendants were helping Ariel slip her coat on. When she saw me, she dipped her chin.
Lord Rudeus, thank you for today.
The rest of her party likewise bowed deeply. I bowed in return, Japanese style, though I was pretty sure I wasn't supposed to do that in this situation.
How is Sylphie doing?
She's talking to Elenialis right now.
I see. It was certainly a surprise to find out Sylphie had family here. I thought she'd lost them all.
Indeed, it really is a small world. Not to mention that Elenialis and Sylphie were as different as day and night, mainly in terms of chastity.
In any case, this is the perfect opportunity. Lord Rudeus, may I have a moment of your time?
Her words hinted at an ulterior motive, but I nodded anyway.
Very well then, come this way.
As she spoke, Ariel quickly cut across the room and moved into the hallway. From there, she proceeded to the front entryway, opened the door, and headed outside. As if it came as naturally as breathing to them, the other three tailed her. I followed suit. Outside, the sun was beginning to set. Ariel stopped along the path where people had been walking and the snow had barely had a chance to pile up. She turned back to look at me.
Lord Rudeus, I realize it might be inappropriate of me to ask, would you agree to a duel with Luke? No magic, just sword against sword.
A very sudden request. Unable to respond, I pursed my lips. Luke looked completely composed, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. This was clearly not something Ariel had decided on the spur of the moment. Could you explain your reasoning, at least?
Just for fun.
For fun? I said, and Luke unsheathed what was a very real sword. Considering it was double-edged, he wasn't going to be hitting me with the blunt side. Can we use wooden swords, at least? I don't even have a real sword.
I don't mind if you conjure one for yourself.
I thought you said no magic?
I'm fine with you using it to create a weapon.
Very well then. I used my earth magic to create a stone blade. I made it thick and durable, which meant that it was heavy too. I did practice my swings every day, so I could wield it just fine, but if it hit someone in the wrong spot and the worst came to pass, they could die. It wasn't something you should hit someone with for fun.
Don't worry, this is something Luke requested.
Luke did?
I don't mind if you use your full power to beat him senseless.
Without my magic, I was just an average swordsman. There was no guarantee I could beat him senseless.
For reference, Luke is an intermediate in Sword God style and a beginner in Water God style. His sword is a magic item, made to cut through steel shields as easily as butter. His boots are the same as Sylphie's, giving a boost to the wearer's speed. His cloak can block heat, his gloves increase his strength, and beneath his uniform, he's wearing sword-proof clothing.
That's incredible! So he was garbed head to toe in a dashing hero's gear. Even selling my freshly renovated house wouldn't get me enough money to pay for all of that. In other words, I might be the one getting beat senseless.
I doubt it, but if you do sense your life is in danger, feel free to use magic.
I'll just pray he doesn't cut me in half before I get the chance. Why had he proposed this in the first place? None of us would benefit from someone dying here. Before we begin, I'd like you to tell me why we're doing this. Have I done something to upset you?
No, it's just for fun. Of course you can refuse if you'd like.
Whether I accept or not, this troubles me. Even this stone sword is deadly enough that it could kill someone if it hit them in the wrong place.
Luke is prepared for that possibility.
Well, I wasn't. I was newly married, and I didn't want to kill or be killed.
Please.
What was this match going to prove? Maybe it was some kind of Asura Kingdom tradition. I could easily picture Old Man Sorrow saying, "If you want to take Eris as your wife, you must defeat me first." But Soros was dead.
Rudeus, please accept. If you're a man, then you should understand.
There it was, the "if you're a man" line. An unfair remark. It was almost like he was saying I wasn't a man because I didn't understand. Ah, well, it's not like we were seriously going to go at each other's throats. All right, please be gentle with me then. I was going to use my demon eye of foresight at least. I didn't want anyone to die accidentally.
Thank you for accepting our request.
I still didn't understand why they were doing this, but at Ariel's words, Luke readied himself. As soon as Cliff saw that, he called out to me, confused. Oh, Master Cliff, if things start looking bad, please cast a healing spell immediately.
But yeah, I was already planning on that.
Stone sword in hand, I slowly took a stance of my own. We were about 3 steps apart. That meant 1 step and we could swing at each other. It was closer than the distance I normally set for myself in my simulations.
Now then, are you ready?
Yes. After hearing my confirmation, Ariel said sharply, "Begin!" "Ha ha!" Luke bellowed and kicked off from the ground. As the snow scattered, he launched his body toward mine. He was slow. No, compared to the average person, he probably wasn't that slow. He was probably about as quick as Linnea, but still, slow enough that I could predict his movements. He was nowhere at Eris's or Rouget's level. Never mind Orsted's. He was probably a step behind Soldat too. This was all he could muster, even with a magic item. Luke closed in, swinging his sword diagonally. Ha! His form was technically correct and he was putting his weight into the swing. He wasn't relying too much on his magical items either, but he still moved much more slowly than my mental simulations. Ha! I aimed for his forearm. Sword God style, initial strike, arm chop. It was a skill I'd learned long ago, a movement ingrained in me through hundreds of thousands of practice swings. Gah! The weight of my blade broke his arm in a single swing. He dropped his sword and it disappeared into the snow below.
Not yet!
Luke immediately tried to pick it up with his left hand. No, it's over. I prevented him from grabbing the sword by slamming a foot into his chest, sending him flying. He went rolling through the snow. When he tried to get up again, I pointed my sword at him.
That's enough.
Ariel's exclamation ended the duel. Luke punched the ground with his broken hand, then groaned in pain and cradled his arm.
Elamoy, heal him.
At the princess's command, one of her attendants raced over to him. She held his broken arm so close that her enormous breasts threatened to swallow it whole, and then cast healing magic.
Amazing!
He didn't know the first thing about swordplay, so he had no idea the match had been a joke. There were plenty of swordsmen and warriors out there more skilled than I was, such as Soldat or Eris. I was sure I couldn't defeat either of them without using magic, and my demon eye. Luke was merely a normal swordsman. If I hadn't used my eye, we might have traded a few blows, but it was just as Ariel had said. He was no match for me. "Master Luke, are you all right?" "I'm fine." Once I heard his calm reply, I tossed my stone sword aside. It sank through the snow. Luke stood up and looked my way. His usual superficial smile was nowhere to be seen. He looked serious.
Take good care of Sylphie.
Of course. He was testing to see if I was strong enough to protect Sylphie? It would help if you'd explain your reasoning.
It's not terribly important. Luke just had his own feelings on the matter. Male pride, I suppose.
Male pride. What, is he in love with Sylphie too? I hadn't mean to make fun of him, but Ariel furrowed her brow at my question. Crap, maybe that was a rude thing to ask.
We all love Sylphie, but not in a romantic sense of the word. As comrades who've been through life and death situations together, we share a powerful bond.
My apologies. It was a rude thing to ask.
As long as you understand.
Ariel's expression regained its usual composure. She looked toward the house, where Sylphie and Elenialize were likely still talking. Eventually, I will return to the Asura kingdom. There are only 2 paths from that point. Either I take the throne or I die. There is a significantly higher probability that it will be the latter and the palace will be my grave. Do you have to go back?
If I didn't, I'd betray the memories of those who died to get me this far. It is my duty to return to Asura.
Privilege came with responsibility. Despite her grim words, there was no emotion on Ariel's face. Hers was the face of someone who didn't doubt for a moment that they were doing what they must. Not that I was in a position to judge, but as far as I was concerned, that conviction made her a good candidate for the throne.
Sylphie, however, has no such duty.
True. Sylphie was neither a royal nor a noble, just an outsider who'd been tossed into the royal palace during the displacement incident.
Sylphie saved my life. She's been there for me as my friend this whole time, even after she found out her parents had passed. I've depended on her so much, but enough is enough. It's about time I stopped relying on her and left her to walk her own path.
Even so, Sylphie had every intention of following the princess. They'd been through so much together. I could understand why Sylphie wanted to see things to the end. If Ruzard had decided to challenge Laplace to battle, for instance, I'd probably have gone along with him, my legs trembling the whole way. Wait, that probably wasn't a good comparison, but the feeling of wanting to fight alongside your friend was the same. If Sylphie chose to follow Ariel, I would be proud of her. But if I thought it was a fight she had no chance of winning, I would want to stop her.
Sylphie intends to stick with me to the end, but she's married now, and if the two of you try your hardest, I'm sure you'll eventually have children. When that happens, I expect her resolve to follow me will wither of its own accord.
I wasn't so sure about that. When that time came, would I even be able to stop her? I didn't think so. If anything, I'd probably go with her to help.
Having said that, if you mistreat Sylphie, then I will take her back. I'm sure we can't defeat you with a raw show of power, but there are plenty of other methods. So please, don't make me feel like she would be better off coming with us.
I'll take those words to heart.
Well then, Lord Rudeus, please take good care of Sylphie.
Ariel turned on her heel. Her two attendants bowed to me. Luke gave me a look of acknowledgement as he picked up his sword. Then the four of them left, shuffling through the snow until they disappeared, not even waiting for Sylphie to come downstairs. As I watched them leave, I thought to myself, when that day comes, no matter what Ariel says, we're going to be there for her. When we returned to the house, Eleniles and Sylphie were just coming down the stairs. The former's eyes were swollen, but she looked like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders.
Oh, Rudy, where is Princess Ariel?
She just left.
Oh, I'm sorry for not being there. Did she say anything?
Just take good care of Sylphie. I was still debating how best to mention the duel, but Cliff cut in front of me.
Luke suddenly challenged Rudeus to a duel. But leave it to Rudeus. He countered Luke with a single blow. I wish I could show you the way that insufferable jerk cowered as he held his broken arm.
You never disappoint, do ya, Cliff? Totally misread the room right there, I thought dryly. Not that it mattered, but I got the feeling he didn't like Luke very much. Well, whatever. When Sylphie heard that, she drew her brows together.
Rudy, you had a fight with Luke?
No, I wouldn't really call it a fight. I was asked to duel him, and Princess Ariel watched us.
I see. Luke probably wanted to see for himself.
See what?
Your strength. Until now, Luke has been the one protecting me in the...
I understood what she was trying to say, but I was surprised to learn his zeal ran that deep. I guess you never really knew a person's heart, huh? More importantly, my wife had just learned I'd been in a duel, and she wasn't even worried about me. My opponent had used a real sword, after all.
But thank you, Rudy.
For what?
For going easy on Luke. He's weak. You'd kill him if you used your true strength.
Apparently, it never even crossed her mind that I might lose. Poor Luke, though. Well, enough about me. Are you done talking?
Yeah.
So Elenilis was Sylphie's grandmother after all. Law's mother, in other words. Elenilis had birthed half-elf children all over the world, and due to the curse and her own personality, trouble followed her everywhere. Her conflict resolution abilities were something she'd only mastered in recent decades. Prior to that, she'd often left storms and scandals in her wake, some of which still haunted her. Her reputation was particularly bad among other elves, who routinely ostracized her children just for the crime of being related to her. Many of her children and grandchildren disparaged her, trying to distance themselves from her. Elenilis stopped revealing her true name to any children she went on to have. She would raise them to adulthood, then cut ties with them. That was how she'd been living until now. Elenice had known with just one look that Sylphie was either her grandchild or great-grandchild. She hadn't intended to reveal as much to her, but when she saw Sylphie looking so happy about her marriage, she was overwhelmed with emotion. It was an emotional story. I got teary-eyed myself during the recounting of it. But Elenice refused all attempts to comfort her, claiming this was the result of her own actions. Once that conversation was over, Cliff called me to the corner of the room.
Rudeus?
Yes, Master Cliff?
Stop with the master crap and no more stiff speech. Please call me Cliff from now on. No, scratch the please, just do it.
So there was no need to be respectful, yet he was ordering me around like an authority figure. Ah, well. I'd give him a break this time.
It's about Lise.
Okay.
Honestly, she's not the person I thought she was.
Uh-huh. And? I'd understand if he felt disillusioned. After all, the person he'd loved all this time actually had not only children, but grandchildren as well. Judging by her conversation, there was a possibility she even had great-grandchildren. Even I'd be considerably shocked. However, if he was going to say help me break up with her after hearing that conversation, even I'd be pissed. It wasn't like Elenice had deceived him. Cliff had misunderstood her and fallen in love with her of his own accord. People in similar situations often felt disenchanted after hearing the truth, but it still disgusted me. Granted, I wasn't going to stop him. Elenice was better off cutting a creep like that out completely and then living with us. Then, if Sylphie permitted it, we could have our own little pseudo-family. Wait, no, I couldn't be with anyone other than Sylphie. Well, hold on, you could say we were doing this for Sylphie's sake.
She's even more tragic than I thought. I'm gonna get rid of her curse, no matter what it takes. Since I'm a genius, I'm sure I'll figure out how to do that eventually, but just to be certain, would you mind helping me out?
Which one of us was the horrible piece of crap now? Me. Sorry, Cliff. So you don't feel disillusioned after hearing what she said?
Disillusioned? Of course not. Why would you even say that?
Be but the woman you love has slept with a bunch of other people, and not only does she have kids, she even has grandkids, you know?
And what of it? I'm a follower of Melis. No matter what her circumstances are or how far she is from my picture-perfect ideal, she loves me, and I have a duty to make her happy.
He said it. I trembled. Oh, crap. Maybe I really had underestimated him. I should probably call him Lord Cliff from now on. Well, maybe it wasn't necessary to go that far. I'd just call him Master Cliff like I always did. Okay, I understand. I am happy to be of assistance with whatever I can. He gripped my small hand firmly in his when I reached out for a handshake.
Also, stop being so formal. We're friends, aren't we?
I refuse. I was filled with a deep sense of respect toward Cliff. Meager as my help might be, I was happy to lend it to him. Cliff and Elenice were the last to go home. Now it was just Sylphie and me. The two of us began cleaning up the messy room our guests had left behind. Well, I said messy, but our guests had mostly been well-bred, so all we had to do was wipe down the floor where they'd spilled alcohol on it. We had quite a bit of food left over, but it was probably better than having prepared too little. We'd be eating leftovers again for dinner. By the time we finished cleaning, the sun had set and the sky had grown dark. I lit up the place and returned to the living area. When I took my spot on the three-seater couch, Sylphie plopped down beside me. I was suddenly exhausted from the day's events.
A lot happened, but I'm glad it went well.
Sylphie said with a smile, resting her head on my shoulder. Yeah! When I wrapped my arm around her shoulder, she leaned all of her weight against me. I buried my face in her hair and took a deep breath, drawing in her smell. Such a sweet scent.
Rudy. That tickles.
But she didn't rebuff me. I kept on stiffing.
I'm thinking about growing my hair out.
I'd suggested she do that many times long ago, only to be refused each time. I'd always thought twintails or a ponytail would suit her, but I never thought I'd get to see it. Are you certain that's what you wish to do?
Why are you being so formal?
Because it's a serious conversation.
It's not really that serious. I just, my hair isn't green anymore, right? Princess Ariel told me to be more feminine, but I still plan to wear pants at school, so I thought maybe I should at least let my hair grow out.
So that was it. She didn't feel self-conscious about her hair anymore. You're not going to wear the girl's uniform?
No way. It wouldn't look good on me.
Come on, it totally would, I thought. If she's got to see it to believe it, then I'll just buy her one when I get the chance. That aside, well, I'd like to see how you look with long hair. No doubt you'd be cute, though you already look cute right now.
Thank you. Okay then, I'll grow it out.
That meant I would soon have to say farewell to the short-haired Sylphie. I needed to burn this image of her into my mind while I still could. Although I guess I'd be able to see her like this again if she cut her hair.
Rudy, I'm going to work hard so your love for me stays strong.
Why'd she have to say it like that? Now I felt teary-eyed. How did I get to be so loved? I'd have to work hard too, so her feelings for me would never fade. Apparently the smug asshole type wasn't quite what she had in mind, so I'd quit being thick-headed and aim for being clever instead. I wasn't sure if I could actually do it, but I had to at least try. Sylphie, thanks for all the work you did today.
Thank you too, Rudy.
Since we were both exhausted, I decided we'd just hit the bath and then relax. That was how Sylphie and I got married. Chapter 8, Life with a House. 2 months had passed since Sylphie and I got married. The university entered a new semester. I became a second-year student, and my daily life underwent a dramatic change. First, I moved out of the dorm and began commuting from home. I woke up every morning in a big bed inside my own house. If Sylphie was beside me, we shared a good morning kiss. Her mornings began early, so she woke about the same time as I did for my training. Once I was up, I'd start my routine by running a circuit around the inside of the city, then practice swinging the stone sword I'd conjured before during my duel with Luke. As usual, I was unable to wrap a battle aura around my body, but that didn't mean practicing was pointless. For some reason, Badigadi often popped in during my practice, bellowing out the obnoxious laugh that was so loud it annoyed the entire neighborhood. I greeted him politely, nonetheless, and he sometimes acted as my sparring partner. Skill-wise, he didn't match up to the likes of Rudeus or Ghislaine. In fact, he was weaker than Eris actually know. It wasn't that he didn't measure up, just that I got the sense he wasn't using his full strength. Since he had an immortal body, maybe he just didn't feel like defense was necessary. On the other hand, he'd offer me surprisingly useful advice every so often, so maybe he really was quite strong. After training, we'd make tracks for my house, where Sophie would greet us with breakfast. Badigadi would disappear as soon as he ate his portion. The man was truly a mystery to me. I wondered what he was thinking. Some days, it didn't seem like he was thinking at all. On days when Badigadi wasn't there, Sylphie and I would lovingly feed each other. When breakfast was over, we would head to the university, which was about a 30-minute walk away. Zenoba remarked that it was a bit inconvenient, but it didn't feel that far to me. I could cover the ground pretty quick if I ran. We would arrive well before class started. Sylphie and I would part ways just before the dormitories, and I'd kill some time here and there before going to check in on Zenoba and Cliff. Cliff had his nose to the grindstone researching curses every morning. He'd claimed a research lab and spent his time in there disassembling magic items, digging through books, and searching for patterns. Eventually, he began work on an original magical instrument of his own design.
I know you mentioned transferring a curse, but I can't think of any way you'd go about that. But if my own theory is correct, I should be able to design a magical instrument that can negate curses.
His theory was that magical items and curses function much the same. A curse placed on an object produced a magic item, whereas a curse on a person produced a cursed child. In other words, if you could do something about the effects of a magic item, then you could do something about a curse. The fact that he was stuck using language as ambiguous as something was proof his research was still in the beginning stages.
I have nothing which requires your help right now. This is my research, so please let me handle it. This is a matter of pride for me.
He sounded like a child who thought I might be there to nab his toys. It'd be one thing if Nanahoshi were the one offering to help him, but I didn't really think there was much I could do to assist. Afternoons brought with them a high likelihood that Elenize and Cliff would be all over each other, so I refrained from visiting him during that period. Zenoba often spent his entire day in his own research room. Generally, he'd be trying to decipher the writing we discovered in the manor, or affectionately rubbing his cheek against that of the automated dolls. He made no progress so far, but that was to be expected. His passion was undeniable. I was certain he'd eventually crack the case.
Master, please watch Julie. I'll take care of this.
Apparently, he was terrified that I'd stick my nose in his research. He spoke as if I'd solve the puzzle at a single glance and bring his quest to an end. People were really overestimating my abilities. I didn't know anything outside my area of expertise. On a related note, Zenoba was continuing to make gradual progress on the Red Wirren figurine during his breaks from research. Julie sat nearby, making a figurine herself. He'd given her her own desk to work at, and she'd been practicing diligently.
Grandmaster, thank you for your instruction.
Now that I couldn't teach her at night, I was teaching her earth magic in the mornings instead. We were coming up on a year since we'd found her, and her growth was startling, but it was still too soon for us to put our mass production plans into practice. For now, all I could do was have her focus on practice through steady repetition. According to Sylphie, if a child continued practicing the same school of magic while they were young, it would increase their proficiency with it. Therefore, I had her focus on using only earth magic. If Sylphie's theory was correct, then Julie would soon be an expert in earth magic. We could move on to the next phase once she'd progressed some more. There was no need to rush. I still went to the cafeteria for lunch. For various reasons, I'd decided to not bring food from home. The seats in the corner of the first floor were for our exclusive use, being Zenoba, Julie, occasionally Badigadi or Cliff and Eleniles, as well as Linnea and Persenna. These days, Luke or Sylphie showed up almost daily. They didn't eat with us, but they would exchange a few words before taking their leave. According to them, it was to give the appearance that Ariel and I were friends. I didn't chat much with Luke, but I was getting more lovey-dovey with Master Fitz, who was beginning to look more feminine as her hair grew longer. Some people still thought she was a man and regarded us with strange looks when they saw us being affectionate. Sylphie still didn't like public displays of affection when she was in her Fitz persona. She got really upset when I touched her butt one time. She didn't get angry or glare at me. She just looked sad. She told me she wanted me to refrain from being a creep in front of people. That was fair, I supposed. Sylphie wasn't the type to worry about public attention, but she probably didn't want people to think her husband was some kind of sex-crazed baboon who couldn't keep it in his pants. I'd behave myself, for her sake. After lunch, I'd always head to class. As usual, I was taking advanced tier healing and intermediate tier detoxification classes. I'd sit beside Persenna, and we'd focus entirely on memorizing information, casting healing spells on each other, and eating meat. On days when I didn't have a class, I would teach Linnea offensive magic.
You haven't been touching us lately. Mew. You still stink of arousal, but I can't get over how weird it feels that you don't try to touch us.
The two of them couldn't hide their surprise at my good behavior, but I had pledged my fidelity to Sylphie, and I wasn't going to touch other girls. Persina would tease me with flirty giggles, but I just ignored her. Linnea would sometimes flash her underwear at me, but I tried to avert my eyes. Unfortunately, I couldn't beat my deeply ingrained instincts, so I knew she was wearing blue today. As the afternoon came to an end, I would pay Namahoshi a visit. She was as crabby as ever. Now that my libido had returned, I could appreciate the petite Japanese build and features that made her stand out amidst the people of this world. My preferences must have changed since my last life, since I didn't find her gloomy aura that appealing. It did, however, fill me with a sense of nostalgia.
Just so you know, if you lay a hand on me, I'll go crying to Orsted.
Please don't do that. She'd say things like that if I stared too much. She knew how terrified I was of Orsted. I had no intention of touching her anyway, so the exchange was basically reaffirmation that we were maintaining our distance. Nanahoshi always gave off an aura of irritation and impatience. However, we burned through her stock of untested magic circles in the past 6 months. It seemed it was about time for her to move to the next stage. Once I finished with Nanahoshi, I'd meet back up with Sylphie. Her bodyguard duties continued on the same schedule as before, but since we were newly married, the princess let her go home for a while once class ended. She did still have to guard the princess at night, so after eating dinner, doing a bit of cleaning and taking a bath, she'd immediately head back to the school. It seemed like twice the effort. I was putting her through a lot. Sylphie, however, didn't seem to feel that way. I like having a house to come back to. Or so she said. Sylphie was on night guard duty 2 days out of 3. That meant she only had 1 day to rest, which was quite a bit considering that she'd had no days off up till now. The fact that she even got the 1 day off now was all thanks to Elenilis, who'd personally volunteered to guard the princess instead. I'd never seen them talk, but apparently they got along quite well. The two of them seemed like oil and water, what with Elenilis' promiscuity and Ariel's circumspect nature, but according to Sylphie, Ariel wasn't all that pure after all. She was just putting on a show. On the days Sylphie didn't have night duty, she and I would stop by the market on our way home to buy 3 days' worth of groceries. Most of the food for sale were things with a long shelf life, such as beans, potatoes, and dried meat. I craved rice. If we expanded the distribution routes that Nanahoshi had developed, perhaps we could import rice from the south. An issue for later at any rate. Once we got home, it was dinner time. Contrary to her tomboyish appearance, Sylphie was a good cook. She didn't know all that many recipes, but her cooking reminded me of my childhood. It tasted like the food I'd eaten growing up in Buena Village, which made sense, given that Lilia was the one who taught her. She looked so cute with her apron on, bustling about the kitchen. It made me want to take her in my arms from behind. I once tried to help her cook, but she politely turned me down. Apparently, there was something about making food that she didn't want to share with anyone else, even though it wasn't like she was a chef or anything. I thought of suggesting that she wear nothing but an apron, but had the feeling she'd turn me down. We occasionally had guests when dinner time rolled around, and by guests I meant the 13 we had previously invited. Cliff and Elenilis came over relatively often. Sonoba, perhaps, showing restraint, rarely ever showed up. Nanahoshi came over about once a month to use our bath. She probably wanted to visit more frequently, but refrained from doing so. Before any of you get the wrong idea, just let me say it right now, I did not peek at her while she was bathing. Nanahoshi seemed to be on her guard about the possibility anyway. She only ever came over when Sylphie was home. Once dinner was finished and our guests had gone home, we were left to ourselves for some sweet, sweet alone time. As Master Fitz, Sylphie behaved with dignity throughout the day and expected me to exhibit similar restraint and propriety, even though just seeing her from afar made me want to run up to her like an excited puppy. By contrast, she was loving and submissive at night. She'd do whatever I asked. Even when I let myself slip and said something filthy, she'd gladly fulfill my requests. Compared to the people in the Asura Palace, you're completely normal, she told me. Sylphie never asked anything of me. In fact, she was taking a bat to my calm, rational side when she said, I want to do whatever you want to do, Rudy. I'd given in to temptation several times and done just that, and I couldn't keep treating her like an object. Sure, I loved sex. This was everything I'd ever dreamed about. Still, Sylphie was my wife. Respect, that's right, I wanted to respect her. Or so I thought, but when she looked at me with those shimmering eyes and said, You don't have to restrain yourself, it felt stupid to even try. I was a weak man. There were words I wanted to try saying at least once in my life, or have said to me. There were things I wanted to try doing at least once in my life or have done to me. In the past 2 months, I'd managed to strike half of those off my list. I didn't pressure Sylphie into anything, though. Anything she wasn't keen on, we didn't do. Even so, I wanted to do something for her. With that thought in mind, I asked, Hey, Sylphie, is there anything you want me to do for you?
Huh? Okay, well, do you remember what you promised me before?
As soon as I heard that, I prostrated myself. I'm sorry, I don't remember. Flustered, Sylphie forced me to look up, saying,
It's not your fault. It was a year ago. Remember the thing you used? Disturb magic. I want you to teach me.
That's no trouble at all. I'll teach you every last detail.
Well, I know advanced tier healing magic. Rudy, you're taking classes on that, right? I can teach you too.
So we spent our time after dinner teaching each other magic. I would teach Sylphie how to use disturb magic and she would teach me how to use healing magic without incantations. There was no real purpose to the latter, but she wasn't satisfied with just me doing the teaching. I wondered why that was. Was she the type who weren't happy if they weren't providing their partner with something, or the type that felt uncomfortable receiving anything from other people? It was true that I couldn't cast healing magic without incantations anyway, so I gratefully accepted her instruction. I could keep an eye out for anything else I wanted to learn from her in the meantime.
I don't think it's all that different from casting other types of magic without an incantation.
I used to think so too, and yet the fact remained that I couldn't use healing magic without an incantation. Not even after listening to Sylphie explain how it worked, and trying to put her instructions into practice.
Rudy, is it possible that you don't understand what it feels like to be on the receiving end of the spell?
Healing magic entailed touching another person's body and pouring your own mana into them, using your mana to alter the flow of their mana and heal their wounds. I was unable to conjure the feeling of having someone else's mana interfere with mine. Put more simply, it was like pressing your right index finger against your left palm, but only the finger felt anything. Offensive magic was as easy as breathing to me. This was odd. Maybe it wasn't just healing magic that I couldn't cast without an incantation, but all kinds of support magic. Maybe, like with battle auras, it was just something that people who'd been reincarnated here from another world couldn't master. Or maybe I just didn't have a knack for healing magic.
I'm kind of relieved, you know? There are actually things you can't do.
Sylphie said with her characteristic toothy grin. Being outshone by someone at anything was a bit vexing, but it had to have been discouraging for Sylphie to think that there was nothing she could beat me at. So I didn't let it bother me. Unlike my futile attempts at healing magic, Sylphie mastered the essentials of disturbed magic in no time. She still needed practice, but I was sure she'd be able to use it in battle eventually. Sylphie really was an exceptional student. I taught magic to a number of people, Eris, Ghislaine, Zenoba, Julie, Linnea, but I felt like Sylphie was the quickest among them to learn. She might even be a kind of genius herself.
But this is kind of unfair, isn't it? A magician can't do anything if you do this.
Well, one of the 7 great powers used a similar technique.
Really? So that's where it came from. You're acquainted with one of the 7 great powers, then?
No, I'm not. Nanahoshi is. Sylphie would probably worry if I told her one of them had nearly killed me. It was probably safer to keep any mention of Orsted to myself, too. There was no guarantee he wouldn't come at me for teaching people how to use disturbed magic. You probably shouldn't share this information with anyone else. That goes for disturbed magic as well. If one of the 7 great powers came after us, I wouldn't be any match for them.
Got it. It's a secret.
Sylphie said, nodding earnestly. On days when Sylphie was on night duty, I made a concerted effort to do the cleaning and laundry. In general, washing Sylphie's clothes was my job, including her panties and bras. Of course, as her husband, I refrained from any acts of perversion. I didn't pocket them or take them to my room to use them to pleasure myself. I took a sniff at Sylphie satisfied my young active libido once every 3 days. I also cleaned the house, more or less, though I did a sloppy job of it, according to Sylphie. Back when I was an adventurer, I would clean every inn-room I moved into for the first time, but other than that, I was the messy type. Sylphie would clean on her days off, but this manor was too huge for the 2 of us to keep spotless. I did think cleaning was a necessity, but the house was just way too big. Maybe we needed to hire a maid. Thinking about a maid reminded me of Lilia, and I wondered if Paul and the others had already reunited with Zenith. It had been 3 years since Ellen Elize and her comrades had located my mother. I estimated it would have taken Roxy and Talon a year or 2 to cut across the Demon Continent and arrive in Milishan. If memory served me right, they would then have departed for the Begaric Continent's labyrinth city of Rapan, and I didn't think that would be a whole year's journey. I'd sent my first letter a year and a half ago. If it arrived as planned, then I should be getting a reply soon. I should be more patient. Ellen Eyes had assured me there was nothing to worry about, but I still felt anxious. Roxy was on the case, and I trusted her. I should keep calm and wait. Now that I thought about it, with Buena Village gone, Paul and the others had nowhere to live. Maybe they'd decide to settle down in Milishan. But if they headed this way, we could live together in this house. Now that I thought about it, you could say that me getting married and buying a house was for the sake of my family. Of course, that was something I only thought of after the fact, so it was nothing more than a convenient excuse. In any case, to think that a former shut-in like me might be looking after my parents, it was kind of moving, though it would be difficult to give up the privacy of my two-person love nest with Sylphie. Chapter 9, The Letter. When I woke in the morning, Sylphie was sleeping on my arm. I took in her white hair, the pale nape of her neck, her long lashes. Such an unbelievably cute girl was lying in bed in nothing but her panties, using my arm as a pillow. Her face as she slept looked so completely relaxed and vulnerable. When I folded back the blanket, her secure petals came into view. There were small bruises on her skin just above them. In other words, hickeys. Ones I'd put on her last night. In my previous life, I hadn't understood the appeal of hickeys on someone, but now I loved waking up and seeing the ones I'd left on Sylphie. It was something similar to what those terrible boyfriends who made their girlfriends get a piercing or tattoo must have felt, if not as vile. A sense of pride. Sylphie was mine. I wasn't going to let anyone else have her. At that thought, my little man stood up for morning roll call. He sure was full of pep, considering how hard we'd gone at it yesterday. In my previous life, the only attention he'd gotten was from my hand, and he'd been a shut-in himself these past couple of years. Now that he had a place to stretch his legs, he was truly bursting with energy. Ah, crap. I can't start getting excited this early in the morning. Sylphie has work today. I would just have to divert that energy into exercise instead, so I extracted my arm from beneath Sylphie's head and replaced it with a pillow. Rudy, you're not supposed to drink from that. Sylphie stirred, curling up in a ball. Her sleep-talking was cute. I wondered what she was letting me drink from in her dreams. Somehow, I found myself stroking her chest. I'd wake her if I wasn't careful, so I did so very gently, like touching silken tofu, very discreet. I had to be the happiest man in the world, getting to experience something this wonderful every morning. Was this what it felt like to be really, truly happy IRL? Rudy? Sylphie opened her eyes slightly and looked at me. Then she grabbed my hand and, still half asleep, smiled and said, "Be safe." "Will do." Then I left the room. It would be another 3 days before we could sleep together again. I would wait anxiously for it. Life had been genuinely peaceful lately. The only event of note was Linnea and Prasenna introducing me to some boy. Apparently he was a first-year delinquent who, in the span of 2 months, had fought and defeated all the other punks in his grade. Then he got so full of himself he wanted to try challenging the boss's group, but his first target, Zanoba, utterly annihilated him. After all that, he somehow became a part of my group. It was completely out of the blue. According to the rumors I'd heard of late, the university was apparently ruled by something similar to the 4 heavenly kings, called the demonic Circle of 6. Rumor had it that the circle answered to me. If someone could beat my Circle of 6, then they earned the right to challenge me. Sounded like the setup for a shonen manga. They weren't going to call it a festival or something like that, were they? Incidentally, those 6 people were Zanoba, Cliff, Linnea, Prasenna, Fitz, and Batagati. If someone did actually defeat all of them, that meant I'd be facing someone who could defeat a demon king. No thanks. In any case, the first challenger this year had already met a miserable defeat at the hands of the first person he targeted. By the time I met him, he was already hanging his head and acting meek, like a dog with its tail between its legs. Apparently, it had been a decent fight thanks to the boy putting distance between himself and Zanoba so he could attack at range with his magic, but Zanoba had withstood all the attacks till his opponent was drained of mana, then closed the gap and sealed his victory with a single punch. It seemed ranged combat wasn't Zanoba's specialty. I would have to teach him the secret Chinese technique of taking a golf shot at your opponent with a rock. In any case, I'd somehow become the boss of the school without my knowledge. At least it made the delinquents listen to me. That was especially useful when I recently found some of them beating up a student behind the main school building. I intervened verbally, though I was prepared to fight them if necessary, and they just went pale and stopped. It was nice being able to stop bullies with just a few words. Not bad at all having power like that. As long as I lived, I wouldn't allow others to harass the weak. Not even if the person being bullied was somehow to blame. Then one day it finally arrived. A letter from Paul. "Dear Rudeus, I got your letter. So you're enrolling in the University of Magic? Congratulations. I'm glad you're walking your own path. I'm sure you've heard this from Elenilis already, but we've found Zenith's location thanks to Roxy, Talhand, and Elenilis and are on our way to retrieve her. Give Elenilis my regards. Of course, she'll probably just look disgusted if you do. On to the real topic. We're currently in Eastport. We're about to head to the Bagarit continent next. I've never been there before, but it's said to be one of the harshest places in the world after the Demon Continent. I hesitated to take the children with me. Norn and Aisha are still only 9. That's when the idea came up to send the 2 of them to where you are. Of course, it's not like they could just go by themselves. Ginger volunteered to accompany them, but I wasn't sure if that would be enough. Just then, I ran into someone you know. They offered to take on the task of escorting the children to you, and I agreed. I'm sure you'll be surprised when you see them. They're very reliable. Honestly, it was a painful decision. I kept thinking, what if something happens to them along the way? What if something horrible happens and I'm not there? Much as I want them with me, I also want them to be safe. You as well. Once they get there, just find a place to live, no matter how small, and send them to school. I sent them along with enough money to cover their living and enrollment expenses. It's quite a large sum. Don't go using it to buy women, okay? I'm just teasing. Knowing you, you'll do a good job, I'm sure. But yeah, I get this is something I should be doing myself. Sorry for being a terrible father. I feel bad asking this of you, but please, do me this favor. Come to think of it, you're already 15. Though I guess you may be 16 or 17 by the time this letter gets to you. Either way, you're an adult. I feel bad we couldn't celebrate your birthday together. I won't be able to celebrate Norn or Aisha's 10th birthdays either. Well, we can have one huge party when we all get back together, as a family. Leave finding your mother to me. The Fitto Search and Rescue Corps have effectively disbanded, but I have plenty of firepower on my side. Between Lilia, Talland, Roxy, Vieira, Shara, and myself, we can make it to the Bagarit continent and back. If things go smoothly, we should be able to join you in Renoa in another year or 2. I did consider sending Lilia along with the children, but apparently she's more worried about me than she is about them. What a mess. I feel pathetic. Anyhow, Lilia trusts Aisha. She's basically taught the girl all she could. Aisha is a genius. I'm a bit scared by the power of my own genes, honestly, considering how you and Aisha both turned out. Norn, though, she's a normal kid. She's not like you and Aisha. You might get really frustrated with her, but try to be patient. I'm afraid I spoiled her, and it's made her a bit selfish. She hates you, and she doesn't get along well with Aisha, so she may feel isolated over there. As her older brother, please be kind to her bed. I also gave them a copy of this letter, just in case. I'm sure they'll be fine considering who's looking after them, but if they don't show up within 6 months of this letter's arrival, I'd like you to go out and look for them. So, that's the gist of it. I feel bad for leaving everything up to you. But thank you. Paul Greyrat. It was a letter full of guilt. Honestly, Paul, I was a bit nervous about Norn and Aisha coming here, but I supposed it was better than them being dragged along to the Bagarit continent. Couldn't he have left them with Zenith's family? No, maybe that presented its own problems. Norn aside, Aisha wasn't related to Zenith by blood. They'd probably be fine traveling here. Compared to the Demon Continent, the Central Continent was relatively safe. Kidnapping was so rampant in this world that it might be a concern, but the folks who did that generally targeted the vulnerable. If Norn and Aisha had 2 capable bodyguards around, they probably wouldn't be an appealing target. Speaking of their bodyguards, Ginger was a knight and a former member of Zenoba's Imperial Guard. I couldn't remember how capable she was, but Shirone knights were trained in water god style, so that should prove useful for an escort mission. Then there was the other, whom Paul called reliable. Who could it be? Geese? Maybe. There was no way it could be Eris. Who else was reliable that both Paul and I knew? Could it be who I was thinking of? They'd mentioned searching the Central Continent, but perhaps good fortune had allowed them to cross paths with Paul. If I was right, they could handle it. In fact, they wouldn't even need Ginger's help. I could tell how much Paul trusted me based off his letter. I had to make sure I lived up to his expectations. I was his oldest son, after all. I was also relieved that I'd made the right choice by marrying Sylphie and getting this house ready. Particularly the latter, we had plenty of rooms. We could welcome my sisters into our home once they got here. The biggest problem I could see was that both my sisters were still young. Our lovemaking sessions wouldn't be very good for their education. But then again, I suppose we could just put them in rooms far from ours. I was looking forward to their arrival, actually. I wondered how soon it would be. 2 months from now, perhaps. Wait, there was something I had to do before that. This is exactly the kind of thing I need to consult Sylphie about first. I went looking for her. Right about now, she would be in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. When I ventured in, I found her chopping vegetables. There was a rhythmic thunk each time the blade came down on the cutting board. She was so short, with tiny shoulders and a thin frame. Seeing her from this angle just heated me up. Sylphie! I threw my arms around her from behind. Then I slipped my hands in through the sleeves of her apron and groped at her soft breasts. Ouch! Oh no! When I looked, Sylphie had cut her finger. Crimson swelled from the wound and splattered across the top of her cutting board. She'd sliced herself open the moment I hugged her. Eeh!
That's an exaggerated reaction, Rudy. But it's dangerous to do that when I'm holding a knife.
Sylphie, in a rare display, responded reproachfully to my scream. She quickly healed the wound on her finger. The way she wordlessly cast the spell was so natural, almost like it was second nature to her. I'm sorry. I won't hug you when you're cooking.
Yes, just hold on a while. The food will be done in a moment.
I retreated from the kitchen and waited in the dining area, feeling restless and guilty. I sat in my chair and waited. Then, when Sylphie appeared from the kitchen, I lifted my head. I deeply apologize for what happened just a moment ago.
I'm not really that angry. You can just say you're sorry like normal.
Okay, sorry.
That's better. Just be careful next time.
Sylphie sat down by me and we began to eat. Lately I felt so loved too loved that I was scared of the recoil when her love for me ran out.
So then, what is it? It's rare to see you that excited.
Oh yes, the letter from my father arrived.
What? From Mr. Paul?
I handed my surprised wife the letter. Her face was tense as she started reading it, but her expression soon turned to disappointment.
Oh, our letter about getting married hasn't arrived yet.
It seemed she wanted to know my family's reaction to us getting married. As she read further, her expression turned serious. At the end, she murmured, "I see." Then finally she said,
That's great, Rudy. I'm glad everyone's safe.
Yeah. Come to think of it, I'd brought this up without a second thought, even though Sylphie had lost both of her parents. Maybe I was a bit lacking in tact. Sylphie looked at my face and smiled sadly.
Come on, Rudy. Don't make that face. It's true that my mother and father are gone, but right now I have you and Elise. I'm not lonely.
She grasped my hand as she said that and giggled. She'd gotten even cuter lately. Her extremely short hair had grown out, and she was looking more and more feminine. Her adorable ears jutted out between smooth strands of white hair. This girl was my wife. It wasn't a dream, was it? Sylphie, I wanted to create a new family with this cute girl. This desire came naturally bubbling to the surface, though Sylphie was the one who would struggle when it came to childbirth. She had an adorably tiny butt, but the narrowness of her hips might cause problems during birth. This world had healing magic, so death during childbirth was rare, but that didn't mean she wouldn't still be in a great deal of discomfort. More importantly, were we actually ready to raise a kid? Honestly, Sylphie and I still didn't have much life experience. We had steady incomes and we were considered to be of age in this. It's fine, I told myself. Every other living thing in the world managed just fine. I should be able to do it too. Even if I couldn't, I had Sylphie with me. We just had to try our best. Paul would probably show up in another 2 years. Lilia was experienced in childbearing and Zenith and Sylphie got along well. As for Paul, he'd probably just be excited to see his grandchildren. Wait, crap, this wasn't the time to be thinking about that. As you read in that letter, my sisters will be coming our way. I'm thinking about letting them live here with us, but I wasn't sure if you'd be okay with that.
Of course I am. The house will be a lot livelier.
No problems, then. Once we finished eating dinner, we moved to the living area. It was time to study magic. I still couldn't cast healing spells without their incantations, but I could make do by memorizing the words and studying the theory. Voiceless casting wasn't the only technique out there. I did think I was talented, but far from the most talented in this world. Better to make sure my foundations were solid and that I maintained my current level of ability. And Ning. Currently, Sylphie was trying to use Disturb Magic to neutralize the water ball I'd created. She had the tip of her finger pointed at my hand and her face was bright red as she grunted. I was using my mana to maintain the water ball so as to make sure she couldn't neutralize it. If the undulating ball of liquid burst, she would be the winner. She would earn the right to do whatever she wanted to me in bed. Not that she really needed that right, all she had to do was say something, and I'd go along with it. Meanwhile, if I could maintain the ball's shape until the end, I would be the winner. Then I could shower her with my affections in bed as much as I wanted, though I guess I could do that even if I didn't win. Sylphie was currently advanced tier in all schools of offensive magic except fire magic. She also knew advanced healing and detoxification magic as well. In other words, her skill levels were as such. Fire magic intermediate, water magic advanced, earth magic advanced, wind magic advanced, healing magic advanced, detoxification magic advanced, extremely high stats. I only recently found this out, but those 6 types of magic are called the foundational 6, for the 6 most frequently used types. The university sought to have its students achieve beginner-level proficiency in all 6 types during their 2nd and 3rd years. Once they did that, they could pick a major and spend their remaining years elevating their mastery to the advanced tier. If someone had no talent for magic, though, they'd stall out at the intermediate level even if they devoted themselves to the study of just one type, or their mana pool would be too small, or they would trip up on combined magic. There were almost no students who could reach the advanced tier in multiple fields, let alone rise to saint level. Exceptional students like Sylphie and Cliff supposedly came by only once every 10 years or so. Yet, in recent years, there had been one such exceptional student at this school every single year. You could probably call them geniuses, but I honestly considered them ordinary, compared to the monsters that people referred to as gods. What about me, then? Based on what I'd heard from Batigati and Kashirika, my mana capacity was god level, but I got the feeling I'd never be god level myself. I was basically like your average car with the fuel tank of a passenger plane. I could go whatever distance I wanted without running out of gas, but my speed was unremarkable. If you added a jet engine to match that fuel tank, the car would fall apart. As a design concept, I was junk, although it was nice to never run out of gasoline, no matter how much I used. By the way, Sylphie.
What? I'm concentrating right now.
Do you think our kids will have a talent for magic too? What? Sylphie's concentration broke. Her still inchoate disturbed magic spell fizzled, and the previously undulating ball of water snapped back into a perfect sphere. I froze it and plopped it into the cup in front of me. Sylphie bashfully rubbed her thighs together, face bright red.
We won't know until they're born.
And them being born is all dependent on, my hard work as your husband, right? I tried to laugh and play it off, but Sylphie started stroking my thigh. Her delicate hands tickled. I countered by rubbing between her shoulders. It felt kind of nice being able to touch her at this time of day. In seconds, the mood in our living room turned sexual. Sylphie buried her face in my neck as she wrapped her arms around me. So cute. Your hubby is about ready to start working hard right now, I thought. In any case, it was a bit hasty to talk about kids that hadn't even been conceived yet, let alone born. Don't count your chickens before they hatch, or whatever the phrase was. First, we needed an egg.
But elf blood does run strong in me, so it may be difficult for me to... I know you want to have kids, but it may take quite a few months or even years. My grandamine, Miss Elnalize, told me the same thing. So, there's a high probability I won't get pregnant right away.
Sylphie pulled away and hung her head, looking a bit anxious. Several months had passed since we got married. We had a healthy sex life. It was a bit crude to say this, but the moment I pulled the trigger on my magnum, I would shout phrases straight out of an Aeroge. Things like get pregnant and the like. There wasn't really a deep meaning behind the words. I just wanted to try saying them in real life instead of a video game. Sylphie might have actually taken the words to heart, though.
But, well, if I'm not able to have kids, you can take a mistress if you want.
I have no plans of doing that right now.
But Rudy, you want children, don't you?
I tried seeing it from Sylphie's perspective. What if we discovered I was the infertile one? And Sylphie wanted to have children no matter what, so she found a different man to knock her up? I might kill myself if that happened, so I couldn't put Sylphie through it. Don't be silly. It's not that I want children. I just want a physical representation of our love for each other.
Rudy,
I love you, Sylphie, my princess. Although I was the one saying it, the words were still cheesy enough they made my skin crawl. As for Sylphie, well, the people of this world were incredibly susceptible to such lines. Recently, when I said, "Let us drink to the beauty in your eyes," she went all red. It was extremely effective, but we couldn't move on if she got embarrassed so easily.
I love you too.
Her eyes moistened as she clung to my arm. Embarrassed, she pursed her lips, cheeks colored bright. A plus communication. Since things had gotten so exciting, it was time to move to the second floor. I picked her up like a princess. Sylphie wrapped her arms around my neck and surrendered her body to me. It made my heart pound. I was glad she was still in the mood. Chapter 10. Breakdown. The incident happened a month after the letter arrived. That day I was assisting Nanahoshi with an experiment, but its parameters were a little different from the usual.
If this one works properly, I can move on to the next step.
Nanahoshi said, presenting me with a magic circle significantly larger than any of her previous ones. It was still just half the width of a tatami mat, though. It had an intricate pattern densely written across a rare piece of large parchment. Just to be sure, may I ask what this circle is supposed to do?
It's going to summon a foreign object from another world.
And there's no way that'll cause another teleportation calamity, right? The displacement had occurred because Nanahoshi was summoned here, which meant there was no guarantee that a similar incident wouldn't occur just because she was summoning something small. At least, that was what I thought. But Nanahoshi just shook her head.
It's safe, theoretically at least.
Just in case, can I ask what that theory is?
Based on our previous experiments, I've confirmed that the bigger and more complex the object you try to summon, the more mana is required. In other words, magic in this world obeys the laws of conservation of energy. We'll be summoning something simple and small this time. If we assume that the energy from my summoning was what wiped out the region, then theoretically this circle will, at most, only teleport people within a meter of its range. I honestly don't think it's possible, but just in case, I've written a safety measure into the circle itself, so I can control how much mana it uses.
I see. Okay, no, I had no idea what she was talking about. Conservation of energy. What was that again? And how was that different from the law of conservation of mass?
I'm not well informed enough to explain it well to the uninitiated, but it basically means mana is responsible for most of the odd things that happen in this world. That spell you use all the time, Stone Cannon, was it? It appears as if you've suddenly conjured a rock in midair, but actually you've just transformed your mana into a rock.
The law of conservation of energy, huh? So that was it. That was why the more mana you poured into the spell, the hotter the flame in fire magic, and the bigger the resulting mass in earth magic. Also, Nanahoshi went on to explain the principle behind her circle to me after that, but it was all Greek to me after a point. Something about if you applied the law of such and such, the size and effect of the circle would be this and that. Then if you applied this other law of whatever she called it, then blah blah blah. Honestly, if there even was a flaw in her theory, I wasn't going to catch it. The only thing I did know was that she seemed confident, and that meant there was a high chance of success. Well, even if the worst happened and I got teleported somewhere, I was sure I'd find my way back home somehow. If this fails and I get teleported, please contact my family.
I'm telling you, there's no possibility of that happening.
I stepped up in front of the circle. Well then, let's begin.
Please.
I wasn't sure if that word was directed at me or not. Perhaps it was more of a plea to God. I began pouring my mana into the circle, placing my hands on the edge of the paper. A current rippled through the circle and it began emitting a glow. I could feel my mana being sucked right out through my arms. But it was strange. Something didn't feel right. It seemed like the path the light was traveling on was obstructed. as if one part wasn't lighting up. Pissed, there was a soft zap, and suddenly the mana stopped flowing. The light emitted by the circle faded. It was over. There was no further reaction from the circle. I looked at it closely and found a tear on part of the paper. Maybe it had short-circuited and the safety kicked in. Regardless, this was a failure. Well?
It failed.
She fell back into her chair with a thud, planted an elbow on her desk and let out a big sigh. Ha! She stared at the paper still sitting on the floor. The paint had disappeared, leaving only the underlying rough sketch of the circle and the tear caused by the experiment. Nanahoshi continued to look at it absent-mindedly, not moving a muscle. Then after a while she said, without looking at me,
Thank you for your assistance. You can go home today.
the result of almost 2 years' worth of effort had come to nothing in a mere few seconds. Well, these things happen, you know. Nanahoshi did not reply. Was it my fault? No, all I did was provide the mana. I didn't touch anything else. Anyone could have done what I did, as long as they had the mana for it. So even if the experiment failed because of me, it would be Nanahoshi's fault for not briefing me enough. Nanahoshi said nothing. At any rate, this was probably it for the day. Well, excuse me then. I stood up to leave. Before I left the experiment room, I turned back to look. She was still in the same position she had been, immobile. I passed through the messy research room, which looked more like a disorganized warehouse at this point, and stepped out into the hall. I made it just a few steps before I came to a halt. Nanahoshi had been incredibly tense over the past few months. Judging by the way she'd slumped in her chair, she was pretty rattled. Perhaps she wasn't thinking about her next experiment, or the failure at all. But just giving up entirely? Nah. Despite what her looks might lead you to believe, Nanahoshi was tough. Surely she had the capacity to take a failure for what it was and not linger on it. Just as I thought that... Screams erupted from the research room. Then the sound of something breaking. I spun on my heel and hightailed it back into the room. Ah! Nanahoshi was banging her head up and down in a frenzy. She tore out pages from a book she'd written in and scattered them across the floor. She knocked over some shelves and spilled the contents of a jar. She ripped off her mask and slapped it against the ground. Then she started tearing at her face and stumbled, slamming into a wall. She punched it, then tripped again on the spilled contents of the jar and finally collapsed onto the floor, where she grabbed fistfuls of sand that had spilled out of the jar and hurled them at the ground. Then she stood and started tearing at her hair instead. Panicked, I rushed over to her and pinned her arms behind her back. Hold on, calm down. I can't go home. I can't go home. I can't go home. Nanahoshi's eyes looked vacant as she mumbled those words. All of the muscles in her body went tense, as if she were preparing to go berserk again. I can't go home. I can't go home. I can't... Oh! She went into a writhing frenzy, fighting as hard as she could to break out of my grip. But her strength was only that of a high school girl and a shut-in at that. Extremely weak, there was no way she could tear herself away. Before long, her body went limp. When I released her, she just weakly sank to the floor. Hey, are you okay? I got a distinct sense that she was very much not. She was white as a sheet with vacant eyes and dark circles. Her lips had lost all color and were dry and cracked. This was the face of someone who was in a very bad state, mentally. She might just hurt herself. I couldn't leave her alone like this. What should I do? The person who could help most in a situation like this was Sylphie. That's right, Sylphie. She might be able to do something about this. Mushoku Tensei Volume 10 by Rifujin Namagonat, cast by Artale Studio. If you are interested in creating your own audio drama like this, please visit artale.ai and use promotion code ARTALE to activate your account. Now enjoy the story. Fortuitously, she had no night duty today. Okay, I'm going to take Nanahoshi back to our place for tonight then. Wait, before that, I should probably find somewhere for her to calm down. Are you okay? You overdid it a bit. Let's rest for today, okay? Nanahoshi didn't respond. I put my arm around her shoulder and practically dragged her to her feet. Then I hauled her out of the research room. Maybe we should lock it. Nah, we'll worry about that later. It should be fine for one day, probably. I guided us toward the fifth-year classrooms where Sophie should be. Should I ask someone to get her for me, or should I go into the class and get her myself? People stared as we passed, Nanahoshi leaning on me for support. This was annoying. We were so conspicuous right now, and Nanahoshi didn't have her mask on. It was probably best to keep a low profile. But how?
Master!
Someone called out to me. I turned to find Zanoba behind me.
Master, what's happened?
Zanoba, Nanahoshi's in trouble. Help me.
Is she sick?
Something like that.
In that case, we should go to the medical office first.
Oh, okay, yes. The medical office then.
I'll carry her.
Be gentle.
Of course. Come then, Master Silent.
He lifted her up princess style, a solid, stable way of carrying a person. Nanahoshi didn't resist at all. She had a weary look on her face, like a husk drained of all energy.
Make way.
Zenoba shouted and plunged into the crowd of people. They split like an ocean before him. I followed behind. In the infirmary, we let Nanahoshi rest on one of the beds. Her face was vacant. What a terrible expression. It almost looked as if the shadow of death were upon her. We informed the resident healer that it was nothing serious. Psychological problems couldn't be solved by healing magic after all. Just as my gaze began to drift to my feet, Julie grabbed the hem of my shirt.
Grandmaster, your face, it looks awful.
I instinctively touched my face. Just what kind of expression do I have right now? Oh no, it seemed I was pretty shaken myself. I needed to calm down a little. That's just 'cause I'm no beauty. I patted her on the head. I couldn't believe I'd made such a young girl worry over me.
Here, Master.
A cup was suddenly thrust at me from the side. Zenoba was the one holding it. Thanks. I took it gratefully and drained its contents. He'd apparently gotten the water from one of the medical office's pitchers. My tongue felt dry as paper. Apparently my mouth had gotten really parched at some point. I took a seat and breathed a sigh. Zenoba stood beside me and quietly asked,
Master, what happened? I'd never seen you so flustered before.
Well, I explained what had happened in the experiment room, that the experiment had failed and Nanahoshi went berserk, that she looked like she might kill herself if I left her alone, so I helped her. After hearing all of that, Zenoba looked down at Nanahoshi with a complicated expression on his face.
So she's not conducting this research because she wants to.
Nope. It wasn't like she did it begrudgingly, but she wasn't exactly passionate about it either. It was just something she had to do, so she could go home. It had been 6 years since the displacement incident, and what she'd thought would be an important step forward had failed. She'd looked back and realized that 6 years had already passed, and she hadn't progressed at all. I sighed and slumped back in my chair. Zenoba said nothing more after that. The two of us just remained there with Nanahoshi, who was staring absently at the ceiling. After a while, Nanahoshi closed her eyes and fell asleep. Sylphie arrived around the same time. Ariel wasn't with her.
People were saying that you and Zenoba carried a female student to the medical.
What kind of rumors were they spreading now? Did the whole school think I'd knocked out a female student and carried her off to the medical office, where I was probably doing something awful to her? Man, that's cold. Why doesn't anyone trust me? Because I'm the boss. Well, it was not like I'd done much to earn their trust in the first place. Whatever. I told Sylphie what had transpired.
I can't believe something like that happened.
Sylphie wore a solemn expression as she peered over at Nanahoshi. It might be dangerous to leave her alone, so I was thinking of letting her rest at our house today.
But wouldn't it be better to let her rest here in the medical office?
I think it'd be better for her to be with someone she knows when she wakes up. At any rate, I couldn't leave her alone. Nanahoshi was young, and this had clearly shaken her to the core. When people were pushed to their limits, they could do extreme things like hurting themselves. I have no idea how long it will take for her to calm down. I'd like to let her stay with us so I can keep an eye on her for now.
Is it okay if I leave that part up to you?
If it's just taking care of her meals, I can do that. We'd isolate her until she calmed down. It might be good to let her escape from reality a bit. A tactical retreat of sorts. This isn't cheating on you or anything.
I know. Or is there something for you to feel guilty about?
Nope. I had no reason to feel guilty whatsoever. Still, I was bringing a different woman into my house. One in a weak and defenseless position at that. Even so, Sylphie didn't seem to be suspicious. So this was what trust was like, huh?
I'll leave it to you, Rudy. Are you going to go straight home today?
Yeah, I won't be able to go with you, so can you handle shopping on your own?
Leave it to me.
I nodded at Sophie's reassuring response. I'd expect nothing less from her. We left the school and hurried back to our house. Zenoba volunteered to transport Nanahoshi. This time he carried her piggyback, which seemed to suit him better, even if he was a prince. Sorry for the trouble, Zenoba.
No, this is the only thing I can do to help.
He easily carted the listless Nanahoshi around on his back. Julie toddled along behind us. All I had to do was give Zenoba a drill and a diving suit, and people would be calling him Mr. Bubbles. Just to test this out, I tried lifting Julie.
Eek! Grandmaster, what are you doing?
Nothing. Zenoba just glanced over. I kept Julie in my arms as I walked. Her body was surprisingly plump. Just a year ago, she'd been all skin and bones, but it seemed she'd been eating properly. Her muscles were a bit lacking, but she didn't really need to be a beefcake at the age of 7. Is Zenoba treating you well, Julie?
Yes, Master feeds to me lots of food.
Good to hear. The correct way to say it is, yes, Master feeds me lots of food.
Master feeds me lots of food.
Yeah, that's it. Come to think of it, I wondered if Nanahoshi had been eating properly. She'd felt pretty light when I carried her. Food could lift your spirits in a rough time. Even little things like eating your favorite foods or sharing a meal with someone could bring joy. I doubted Nanahoshi had been doing much of that. Phew, just what kind of life had Nanahoshi been living? Locked up all by herself, hardly eating, scarcely talking to anyone, just continuously drawing those magic circles.
It's not your fault, Master. Try not to let it affect you so deeply.
Yeah, I know. Apparently, Zenoba had taken my side to mean something different. He had a serious expression plastered on his face as he looked at me. It seemed he was more worried about me than he was about Nanahoshi. Well, he'd barely ever talked to her, so I couldn't blame him for that. We fell silent for a while after that. In the quiet, I could hear Julie's heartbeat. As a child, her body temperature was higher than mine. She was warm, and hearing her heartbeat was also strangely soothing. I should buy her something next time I went out. When we reached the house, I had Zenoba deposit Nanahoshi into one of the 2 rooms I'd spruced up for my little sisters. She just slumped limply upon the bed. Her eyes were open. She must have woken up at some point, but they were completely empty, as if she were staring off into a distance I couldn't see, almost like a corpse. Would she be coming back from this? Based on my own observation, she was in a precarious state, but not beyond saving. I'd had similar depressive spells myself before, but they passed eventually. For the moment, I patted her down and removed anything I thought could be used as a dangerous weapon. She had a small Swiss Army-style knife on her person. I didn't think she could kill herself with something like that, but I took it anyway, just to be safe. There was nothing dangerous in her room except for the window, since we were on the 2nd floor. Maybe I should use magic to secure it. It wouldn't help if she broke the glass, but I wanted to believe she didn't have the willpower to go that far. Since she wasn't moving, I went back down to the 1st floor.
Is she going to be all right?
Zenoba asked worriedly. He didn't seem like the kind of person who'd had any experience with depression. He had his moments of weakness, sure, but he was generally an optimist. Who can say? At any rate, you were a big help, Zenoba.
No, you're the one always taking care of me, after all. This was the least I could do.
That was Zenoba for you. I could always count on him.
What about you, Master? Are you going to be all right?
Me? Why?
It looks like Master Silent's breakdown had a severe impact on you.
Severe impact. Really? Actually, he was probably right. Nanahoshi had lost it. gone berserk, and then turned into a lifeless shell once I stopped her. Seeing that from beginning to end reminded me of my past. Though it had manifested a bit differently for her, we'd both been through similar mental agonies. I felt her pain as if it were my own. If my circumstances had been a bit different, I might have been the one lying vacantly on the floor in her place. Just a bit. Reminds me of pain from the past.
Would you mind sharing more?
When I was little, I also had a similar experience. I became apathetic and shut myself off.
I can't understand that feeling.
Although the way he said that felt distancing, I didn't want him to flippantly claim to understand either. I'm sure you can't.
Regardless, if there is anything else that could use my strength, please let me know. Strength is the only thing I have in abundance.
Yeah, I'll be sure to do that. I appreciated Zenoba's kindness. He was a pretty good guy as long as dolls weren't involved. Zenoba went home a short while after that. With nothing else to do, I just spent my time reading in Namahoshi's room as she slept. I would want to be left alone if I were in her position, but she'd already been alone up until this point. Always alone. I stayed with her until Sylphie got home. Chapter 11. 3 heads are better than one. A week had passed since we took Nanahoshi under our protection, and the worst of it seemed to have passed. She was eating, albeit only a little. If prompted, she would take a bath and get back out without drowning herself. The ambition I'd previously sensed in her was gone. It was as if the strings that were holding her up had been cut. She suddenly felt as fragile as porcelain and lacking an agency like those women in adult videos who got deceived by Yakuza and conned into selling their bodies. I couldn't leave her alone. I also had to be careful not to let her run into anyone like Luke. The only thing I felt from her right now was a sense of resignation. The failure of that experiment had really hit her hard. I'd never experienced a setback of that magnitude before. The closest was when I spent several years as a no-lifer in an online game, only for my data to be erased. The moment I saw that my login was invalid and got the email notifying me that my account was banned, my heart started pounding violently. I spent the entire day unable to process anything. I took my objections to the management and protested vehemently, but in the end I went to sleep crying. For the next month, I felt no motivation to do anything. I then swore I'd never again get invested in another online game. Nanahoshi's experiment wasn't the same as an online game. Her objective was to return to her world. If she gave up on that, I was afraid she wouldn't be able to go on living. I tried my best to encourage her, but she was just in a daze the entire time. I didn't even know if she was listening to what I was saying, but just as I started to doubt that she was,
I thought I'd covered everything.
instead of responding, I just listened.
A magic circle is basically like what we called a circuit board in our world. You create a single function by combining several circuit patterns. However, one part would not connect, no matter what I did. No matter how I changed the wiring. One part wouldn't connect with the rest. I tried forcing it, but then a defect would appear at...
In order to connect this unconnectable circuit, she'd had to nearly double its size. Then, to compensate for the resulting distortion, she'd patched in another circuit, but still, that one defect remained in her magic circle. Try as she might, she couldn't figure out what was wrong with it, just that one section that wouldn't connect.
It's physically impossible. That means there's no way...
Though it appeared flawless, the magic circle was something she'd pieced together with years of painstaking work. At a glance, it seemed like a problem that was ultimately solvable, if tremendously complicated, but the mysterious defect suggested otherwise.
It's hopeless.
Nanahoshi said as she flopped face down on the bed. I headed out to her research room to recover the diagram of her circle. Her spiel had jogged something in my memory, but I didn't want to excite her prematurely. First, I would confirm whether anything could be done or not. The next day, I called Cliff and Zenoba to the research room. People said 3 heads were better than 1, so I was going to use the power of 3 geniuses' brains. Since I'd summoned Cliff, Ellenise had naturally tagged along. She seemed to frequent his research room. But what about her classes? At this rate, she'd be lucky if she weren't expelled.
It's hard to believe someone like Silent is in that kind of state. She just seemed like she was made of tougher stuff.
Truly strong people don't close themselves off from the world and bear all their burdens on their own.
Well, I suppose that's true.
Elenilis shrugged. Despite her prolific social life, she hadn't interacted much with Nanahoshi. And, though she didn't look it, she was skilled at handling younger women. It might be a good idea to enlist her help in getting Nanahoshi to take a breather. Now then, the two of you. First, take a look at this. When I showed them the diagram, Cliff immediately scowled. Messy? That was an interesting way to put it. There are messy and neat circles?
Of course there are. You have to keep your circles neat and small when creating magical implements. I would have drawn this much more neatly. For instance, if you connected this part here to this part over here, you could make it look much cleaner.
Critiquing someone else's work was easy. If we did as he proposed, it would probably just create other defects in the circle.
But the idea is amazing. I'd never think to loop this part right here. Oh, I see. The reason this part is so complex is because of this here, that there... Maybe I could make more sense of it if I paid more attention to my theory.
So, Master, what kind of magic circle is this?
This is what Silent was studying summoning circles. But she's gotten a little stuck, so I wanted to get your input to help her.
But summoning magic is out of our realm of expertise, is it not?
Well, if we can't solve the problem, so be it. I just figured that we might be able to come up with something as a group that Nanahoshi hadn't been able to on her own. In fact, it was precisely because we were all experts in such different fields that we might be able to come up with an alternative approach. Anyway, please look at this section. This is apparently where the circle disconnected. See? I pointed to the tear in the paper that appeared during the experiment.
This is where it's disconnected, nah? Huh? So the part that should connect to it is here?
Cliff was surprised. Despite being a self-proclaimed genius, he apparently hadn't noticed that right away. Well, that's just how things go, I thought. Do you have any ideas for how to connect this circuit? Cliff folded his arms and fell into thought. He started mumbling here and there to himself. He produced a memo pad from his breast pocket and started scribbling down various things.
This is a challenging problem. Maybe if you redrew the whole no, but then... It's impossible.
Wouldn't it work if you used a multi-level structure?
A multi-level structure? What are you talking about?
With the doll I'm researching, there's several layers of magical circles combined together to produce a single effect. That said, I have only just begun my research, so I've never even drawn a proper circle yet myself, but...
Wait, doll? You mean the one from before? Let me see.
Master, is that all right with you?
Yeah, of course. Zanoba fetched us a sliver of the doll's arm. Cliff studied it with great interest before declaring.
The person who created this was a genius.
It had to be remarkable if someone as self-important as Cliff said that.
I'd never seen a magic circle like this before. I have no idea what the mechanics behind this are. Are these two magic circles, one on top of the other? No, that's not it. There's more than that. It couldn't move properly without all of them together, but it was still able to move even though it's broken. Why? Damn it! What the hell is with this circle?
Cliff gritted his teeth in frustration. Almost like Vegeta witnessing Goku's power level. It was over 9,000?
I don't know all the details yet myself, but... according to the book, this circle apparently controls the elbow.
Sonoba answered Cliff's question so casually that the latter looked as if he might burst into tears. Elenilis rushed over immediately and pulled his head into her breasts, stroking his hair.
There, you're a genius yourself, Cliff. You would be just as knowledgeable had you researched the matter yourself.
I know that.
His face went red as he regained his composure. Perfect, Elenilis. I knew I could count on you. But can you save the bedroom stuff for later? We're kind of busy right now.
Master Cliff, if we used the same technique that was used for the doll, do you think it would solve Silent's problem with her circle?
No clue, but it's worth a shot.
It was a lead, at least. Nanahoshi had only ever drawn her circles on a single flat surface. Perhaps she'd never thought about layering them or folding them. Then again, maybe there was a reason she hadn't tried that yet. I prayed it was the former, and that it would be enough to motivate her once again. The next day I took Nanahoshi with me to her research room. I'd spent the previous day putting the unkempt room in order, and it was in those premises, clean, and yet still disorganized somehow, that Zenoba and Cliff awaited us. The two of them were looking through the research data that Nanahoshi had collected over the years. Seeing them, Nanahoshi just snorted derisively.
What's this? Did you bring me here so you could all ravish me?
Really? Just how far down the path of self-destruction had she gone, all because she'd failed once? Well, I guess it did only take a single big failure to disrupt a person's entire life.
How dare you? I'm a devout follower of Millis.
The Millis faith's tenets regarding chastity were similar to those of Christianity's. Monogamy, no adultery, etc., etc. Very austere.
If you say so.
Nanahoshi just drifted unstably and took a seat. Then she slumped back in her chair. Master Cliff Zenoba, let's just talk about what we came up with yesterday. Nanahoshi listened with disinterest as I showed her a version of her circle that Cliff had corrected with red pen. Then Zenoba's proposal of multi-level structures based on his research. And finally, the idea I'd come up with, three-dimensional circles. She listened to it all without a hint of emotion on her face, sitting perfectly still as if she were frozen. Then our gazes met. It wasn't that she was disinterested. She was just expressionless, concentrating.
It might work.
Then she leaped out of her seat.
So that's it. That's what it is. There was no reason for me to get so caught up in drawing on a flat surface. That makes sense, of course. Putting it on paper will provide depth. If I layer those papers, I can make as big of a magic circle as I want. Why couldn't I think of such a simple thing so much sooner?
Nanahoshi anxiously paced around the room 3 or 4 times. She took pen and paper from her desk and began to draw. She would write something that looked like a formula, quickly erase it, then start again.
No, this isn't it.
There went Cliff, blissfully unaware, inserting his head into the cage of the bear that was Nanahoshi. He produced a red pen out of nowhere and annotated her memo. That's our Cliff, I thought sarcastically. The air in the room changed for the better, and he, of course, still can't read it.
Oh, so that's it. You're pretty clever.
Of course I am. I'm a genius.
Then how about this? What should I do here? I've been unsure about this part for a while.
Hold on a sec.
Cliff and Nanahoshi were working well together. They stood shoulder to shoulder, jotting things down on a sheet of paper. I glanced at their work, but it just looked like a child's scribbles to me. Zenoba, do you get what they're doing?
They're far beyond my understanding.
The two of us had been left out in the cold. Still, Cliff sure was amazing. It hadn't been that long since he first began researching magic circles himself. Well, whatever. Nanahoshi seemed to be in good spirits. Even if she didn't succeed this time, at least she had a foothold once more, and reason to hope. Sorry, Zenoba, but I'm going to have to ask you to stay and watch these two.
Where are you going, Master?
I'm going to get Elenalis. She wouldn't like her man getting so cozy with another woman when she isn't around. I could hear the excitement in Nanahoshi's voice as I left the research room. It was the first time I'd ever heard such emotion from her. A week later, Nanahoshi had completed her magic circle. She consulted with Zenoba and Cliff to fix the problems in the previous version, and with their input, recreated the underlying mechanism. In a magnificent display of intense concentration, she finished the circle in a matter of days. She glued together 5 layers of paper, creating a magic circle that looked as if it were made of cardboard.
Now then, let's begin.
As Cliff and Zenoba looked on, I began pouring my mana into the circle. The circle began to emit a vibrant light that illuminated the room like it was noon. As the mana flowed from me, something gradually began to take shape in its middle. Once the light dissipated, we could see the object from another world that we'd successfully summoned. It was a plastic bottle, one with no label or cap, a simple plastic bottle.
Ooh, most impressive.
What the heck is this? Glass? No, it's softer than glass.
Zenoba and Cliff couldn't hide their excitement at seeing a 500 milliliters plastic bottle for the first time. Elenize and Julie also peered at it with intense interest. Nanahoshi looked at what she'd summoned, clenched her hand into a fist, and let out a barely audible bawl.
Yes, I did it.
A plastic bottle. It was both insignificant and significant at the same time. In that brief moment, our previous world became undeniably connected to this one. We brought over an inanimate object, and an incomplete one to boot, but still, we brought something to this world that had not previously existed in it. You succeeded.
You succeeded!
She nodded firmly, looking truly pleased with herself.
Yes, I did. Now I can finally move on to the next step. As I probe deeper into layered magic circles, I should be able to summon just about anything. If I can organize the circle better, then by just changing out 2 or 3 of the layers, I can most likely...
Nanahoshi suddenly snapped back to reality. She averted her eyes, looking a bit awkward.
Sorry, F for causing you so much trouble.
It's give and take, right? Next time I'm in a bind, lend me a hand, okay?
I'd already planned on that.
Suddenly, I noticed Eleniles staring.
You two sure are close, huh?
You're always quick to assume a love affair, Miss Eleniles.
Well, you are a man and a woman, but it's not very appropriate.
Her eyes looked like those of a reproachful mother-in-law. I had no intention of cheating. Plus, Sylphie knew what we were up to.
That's right, you are newly married. Wouldn't be good if your wife misunderstood.
Eleniles laughed cheerfully, wrapping her arms around Nanahoshi's shoulders.
There's no need for you to worry over that. I know. Let's go to the pub today. It'll be your treat, of course.
Nanahoshi smiled wryly at Eleniles' proposal.
I guess I have no choice. But that makes me even with all of you then.
Sounds wonderful. Wouldn't you agree, Cliff?
Cliff, who'd been crumpling the plastic bottle in his hands, looked back at us.
Yeah, sure. That makes us even, but you're pretty exceptional yourself, so I wouldn't mind you helping me out with my own research next time.
Eleniles giggled, and so our group headed to the pub that afternoon. For some reason, Linnea and Persina joined us as we were making our way through the school building, saying things like,
We don't want to be left out. Take us along too, Mew.
how in the world had they managed to sniff us out? As our little congregation filed outside, Ariel stopped to ask what we were doing. When I explained the situation, she said, then I should have someone chaperone you, and sent Sylphie along. Clearly, chaperone was an excuse, and Ariel was just being considerate. By the time we made it out the school gate, Badigati had joined us at some point and was hanging out at the very rear of our group. No, seriously, just when had he snuck in here? On our way, we stopped by the Magician's Guild, where Nanahoshi went to withdraw some money. She was apparently using it as a bank and had an impressive amount stashed there. The pub we selected was one of Badigati's favorites. Despite the early afternoon hour, there were other patrons present. Nanahoshi didn't pay that any mind, however. She went to the counter and slammed down her bag full of gold.
Reserve the whole place for us.
Huh? Are you serious?
Seeing the barkeep looking flustered, Badigati cut in.
Hold on there.
He took out a bag of gold from his own pocket and slammed it down. Now there was twice the amount.
It's a day of celebration. Let all those who come this day enjoy their alcohol free of charge.
The man sure had a dignified presence about him, just as one would expect of a king. He's my idol. I want to be him, I thought inwardly, mimicking the lines of a certain pair that idolized an infamous immortal blonde vampire from a popular manga series. Acting as if it were the most natural thing in the world, Badigati planted himself at the biggest table in the pub. There, he demanded.
Bring all the food you have on your menu.
Once in my life, I wanted to try using that line myself. Since I wasn't the one paying, I was fine with him ordering whatever he wanted. But were the 12 of us really going to be able to eat all that food? Ah, well, I was sure it'd be fine. When the first of the food was delivered, the Demon King stood and said,
Now then, what are we celebrating today?
the success of silence research.
All right. Well then, Silent, stand up. You must give your commencement speech.
Coaxed to her feet, Nanahoshi rose. She looked reluctant.
Thanks for today.
Okay, now cheers.
Cheers!
And thus the celebration began, not unlike that of the wedding celebration we'd had not so long ago. It was an enjoyable party. When good things happened, people made merry and drank. I'd never participated in a gathering like this in my previous life, not even once. Even in this world, I'd only done it a couple of times. When I was an adventurer, I did occasionally drink alongside the parties I worked with, but I always had a sense of cynicism about it. I thought only fools got drunk, noisy, and wild. I would tut inwardly at their lack of consideration for those around them. But now that I was in the fray myself, I finally understood how those people felt. Sometimes I thought you just needed to let loose and have fun. My belief in that felt especially justified as I looked at Nanahoshi, who was stroking Linea's ears as she sang anime theme songs in Japanese. If you didn't occasionally cut loose and forget your troubles, you wouldn't be able to go on. Life was full of pain, after all. If you didn't try to find the good where you could, you'd crumble. Eleniles and Badigati probably knew that better than any of us, given how long they'd lived. Sylphie and I were going to drink to our heart's content today. We never drank at home, it just wasn't something either of us was used to. And, although it had nothing to do with why we didn't drink at home, I finally understood just how bad a drunk Sylphie really was. No, it wasn't that she was bad, she wasn't bad at all. She was just the clingy type of drunk.
Hey, Rudy, pat my head.
Okay, good girl.
You can eat my ears too, you know?
Don't mind if I do.
That tickles.
When drunk, she turned into an unbelievably adorable creature. It was phenomenal. I was going to have to approach her about drinking more often. But her behavior made me worry about her drinking by herself. Maybe I should tell her not to drink outside our house, but then I wondered if that would be too controlling of me. No, that doesn't matter. She was mine. What was wrong with doing whatever I wanted to something that belonged to me?
Rudy, hug me.
Yes, I'm going to hug your hips tight.
I'm so happy.
The way she laughed sounded so naughty somehow. Just thinking about going home with her and making love to her made me feel like I understood why the world was so full of love songs.
Rudy, you know what? Lately, I've been feeling jealous.
What? Seriously? Of whom? I won't go near them anymore. I'll completely cut ties.
Actually, it's Mr. Rudeus. You told me about him recently, remember? When you talk about him, you just look so, you know?
Yeah, but I just really look up to him. Please try not to let it get to you.
I don't like it. I only want you to only pay attention to me.
That wasn't what she'd said when I told her about Rudeus. This must be how she really felt. I always thought it was scary how she seemed to accept everything with such perfect equanimity, but maybe it only seemed that way because she worked hard to make it so. Just as I pulled Sylphie onto my lap and the two of us started to fool around, Nanahoshi came over. She was drunk and trying to pick a fight.
So sweet I could puke. Knock it off already. Do you even know how many years I've been without my boyfriend?
Was she already done singing? I'd be happy to sing a duet with her. As long as she picked a fairly mainstream song, I would probably be familiar with it. Then again, it might be that generational gap all over again.
At least go somewhere people won't have to look at you.
Come on, don't be like that. They've got alcohol here. Let's have some fun together.
Besides, I've been wanting to say this to you for a while now. Even from inside my room, smooch, creak, creak. What the hell is marriage anyway? Huh? What is it? I mean, it's fine, whatever. But what the hell? There I was, totally down in the dumps, and you two were having sex. I could even hear your voices echo at night. God.
Badigati suddenly lifted Nanahoshi into his arms.
Come along. Today you will sing me your bizarre song.
They're not bizarre. They're popular in my world.
How very interesting. I know not what world it is you come from, but sing them for me. Go on then. Sing as much as you can.
Hold on. I have something to say to Rudeus first.
Bah! You are better off singing if you have nothing nice to say to the man who helped you. Now, sing!
I was just leading into what I really wanted to say.
She probably wanted to express her gratitude. Still, I only did what anyone would do for a friend in trouble. She didn't need to thank me. Besides, she had to have quite the social status to warrant being kidnapped by a demon king. It was almost as if she were the princess of some kingdom. That is, if, said princess, had been carried off to a pub instead of a cell. And there was always a stage in a pub. After a bit, Nanahoshi began singing. An accompaniment joined in belatedly. At first, I thought maybe a troubadour was here, but it turned out to be Badigadi holding the instrument. I didn't know he could play. Also, he'd asked her to sing for him, and yet he was performing alongside her. I definitely didn't understand him. All that aside, it was a familiar song. I couldn't quite place where it came from. Ha, that's what it was. Gandhara, the ending theme to the TV series Monkey. That definitely wasn't something I'd expect her generation to know. Then again, it was pretty famous, though. That said, she sucked, badly, horribly. Maybe it was because she wasn't syncing with the accompaniment. Nah, they both sucked, and that was why they couldn't even sync up with one another. Still, they seemed to be enjoying themselves. Besides, Nanahoshi was the star of our group today. It was fine if she was terrible. Even though her song was awful, it still conveyed her feelings. Did she really want to go home that badly? That was something I couldn't understand. My country of love was right here. Even so, it was an enjoyable party. We should do it again sometime. The party came to an end when its star, Nanahoshi, got completely tanked. Linnea and Priscina carried her off to their dorm room, where they were apparently going to have a sleepover. The rest split off into groups. The heavy drinkers decided to visit a different pub for another round. Sylphie and I opted to return home. In her drunken state, she giggled and clung to my arm. Her legs were a bit unstable, so I kept an arm around her waist to support her, suddenly gaining insight into how playboys felt when they went on group dates and knew they were going to score. Of course, I had no such impure thoughts, though that would change once we got home.
Rudy, isn't it kind of noisy?
Now that she mentioned it, I strained my ears. I could hear the sound of someone banging on something and voices arguing. Sounded almost like when cats fought. As we approached our house, we saw a group standing at the door, noisily banging on it. From afar, all I could see were their silhouettes. Some neighborhood brats, maybe, or thieves of some sort. My mind was still muddled from the alcohol, but I activated my demon eye to be safe. Sylphie slapped at her cheeks and, though still unsteady, stood on her own 2 feet.
Rudy, I'm going to detoxify us.
Got it. Sylphie voicelessly cast detoxification on me, and I could feel the alcohol inside me evaporate. It didn't completely sober me up, but my head felt clearer. Careful to make sure our would-be thieves didn't spot us, I crept quietly toward them. That's when I heard their voices.
The whole reason it got this late was because you got us lost, Norn. Same goes for you, Aisha. You're the one who said it was definitely that way. Besides, we don't even know if this is really the place or not. What are you going to do now? All the inns are already closed. Now we're going to have to make camp outside in the cold. I don't like this either, but you're the one who said we'd stay at his place, so we didn't need a room today. I didn't want to stay at his house, but you forced me to come along. That's because we told Ginger we'd be all right. Getting a room after that would be stupid. You're always like that, always acting like you're better.
Screeching voices. Children's voices, ones that sounded a bit familiar to me. And in the midst of their exchange, I heard names that I knew. Then finally...
Both of you calm down. This is definitely the place. There's a familiar presence here.
A composed man's voice. The instant I heard it, a whirlpool of indescribable emotion rose within me. I let out a sigh of relief and stepped in front of them.
Big brother? Big brother.
My two little sisters, who had both grown considerably, stood dressed in matching Arctic outfits in different colors, like the characters from Ice Climber. Norn Greyrat and Aisha Greyrat. The one with a complex expression on her face was probably Norn, and the one with a look of fierce determination was probably Aisha.
Big brother, I missed you.
Aisha came flying at me, wrapping both arms and legs around my torso like a little monkey. She rubbed her cheek against mine. Her skin felt cold, though I might just have been warm from the alcohol.
Ooh, you feel so warm, and you stink of alcohol.
And you're making me cold. Please, let go. As I peeled Aisha off of me, I looked over at Norn, who had her lips firmly pursed. She dipped her chin in greeting.
You drink alcohol?
Yeah, we had a bit of a celebration. She looked perturbed, and I didn't think it was just because she was shy. Paul had mentioned she wasn't my biggest fan. Then behind Norn was the bald man with a scar on his face, a proud warrior wielding a lance, looking no different than I'd seen him last, 3 years ago.
It's been a while, Rudeus.
It has been a while, Mr. Rudeus. I was hit with a wave of nostalgia, remembering the days we traveled together, just the three of us. How we met, how we parted. What I should say? While I was searching for words, Rudeus suddenly looked behind me.
I heard at the Adventurers Guild that you'd gotten married, but I see it wasn't to Eris.
The person he was gazing at was Sylphie. Her expression turned to surprise, but she quickly bowed.
Rudy, for the moment, why don't we invite them inside?
Oh yes, that's right. Come on in. I unlocked the door and gestured them in. It had barely been a month since the letter arrived. They were here much earlier than I'd expected. Chapter 12, Nostalgia and Frustration. I was currently perched on one of the living room couches. Seated across from me was Rudeus. Sylphie had guided Aisha and Norn off to the bath. Sylphie and I had both sobered up. The smell of alcohol still probably lingered on our breath, but detoxification magic had at least lifted the inebriation. As I looked at Rudeus' face illuminated by the crackling fire, I remembered the first time we'd met. Other memories flooded in, the time we traveled with Eris, just the three of us and other things. It really has been a while.
Yeah.
Rudeus also narrowed his eyes and lifted the edges of his mouth, just the way I remembered. First of all, I guess I should say thank you for escorting my little sisters here.
No thanks needed. Protecting children is only natural.
Right, that was Rudeus for you. I remember jokingly calling him a lolicon when we were traveling together. Still, I was surprised to see the person Paul mentioned in his letter was Rudeus, after all. I'd considered the possibility that it might be Ghislaine, but given that the task was escorting children, Rudeus was the best man for the job, so much so, in fact, that I would have hired him on to be Aisha and Norn's bodyguards for life, if that were possible. At any rate, it had been a long time since the two of us had talked. What had we even talked about back then? Rudeus was quiet, not the kind who went in for small talk.
By the way, what happened to Eris?
It was a question I didn't really want to answer, but he deserved to know. A lot of things. Let me start from the beginning. I told him about what happened after we parted ways in front of the refugee camp, about how Eris and I slept together, how immediately afterwards she disappeared and I fell into the depths of despair, how I couldn't recover from it, how I spent the intervening 2 years searching for my mother, how I met Elenise and heard about what was going on, how I followed the man-god's recommendation and enrolled in this school, how in turn that led me to reuniting with Sylphie, and how she'd helped me recover. Then about our wedding.
I see.
Rudeus listened quietly the whole time without saying a word. Finally, he said,
That happens often.
It happens often? He just nodded.
It's an outlook warriors often get bogged down by. I'm sure Eris doesn't hate you.
But she said the two of us weren't well balanced.
I have no idea whether she meant those words literally, or if you just misunderstood her meaning.
Misunderstood?
Yes, Eris was never very good with words.
Rudeus would know. He wasn't either.
At the very least, She liked you when we were traveling together. If you have the opportunity to meet again, keep a cool head and talk to her about it.
Had I gotten it all wrong when she said we weren't well balanced? Did she just mean that she wasn't at my level? Had she left to get stronger so she could achieve that balance and then return? In which case, maybe her meaning had been, wait for me. Even so, it was too late to be told that now. No matter what she'd meant, I'd still spent 3 years suffering. 3 years in which I hadn't heard a peep from her. The person who finally saved me was Sylphie, not Eris. What was I supposed to do now? Toss Sylphie aside and make up with Eris? There was no way. Besides, honestly, I was still a little terrified by the thought of meeting Eris again. It wasn't as if I didn't trust what Rudeus was saying, but there was the possibility that she really had just gotten fed up with me. It would be a real blow to my feelings if I approached her with the intention of reconciling, only for her to punch me and refuse to look me in the eyes. Let's stop thinking about it. Whatever the truth was, I couldn't change the past. I changed the topic. What have you been doing all this time, Mr. Rudeus?
Ah, yeah.
He looked like he still had something he wanted to say, but still nodded.
After I parted ways with you two, I headed for the forest area in the southern region.
Apparently, Rudeus had guessed that the super tribe hiding in the central continent would be in a forest. He made his way to the dense forest to the south of the King Dragon Mountains, where he conducted an exhaustive search for 2 years. Ultimately, he found no trace of the supered, though he did find several items belonging to people believed to have died during the displacement incident. He delivered those to the closest town. His search of the forest yielding nothing, Rudeus headed south along the coast and arrived at East Port. He'd planned to catch up on the information coming out of Millis there, then head north to search the conflict zone. However, as luck would have it, he ran into Paul. After that, everything happened just as Paul had written in his letter. When Paul hesitated over whether or not to send his 2 girls away, Rudeus volunteered to act as an escort.
Oh, I met your master too.
Master Roxy?
Yeah, she was a little different from your description.
Really? In what way?
The second I said my name and she saw the gem on my forehead, she was completely terrified.
Come to think of it, Roxy was the one who told me that the super tribe were terrifying killers. As a member of the Meagird, who lived in fear of the supered, her reaction was probably inevitable. I wished I could have seen it, though Roxy trembling in terror at the sight of Rudeus. So I heard you traveled alongside Miss Ginger all the way here?
Yeah. We arrived in the evening and went to the university, but couldn't find you there.
They'd thought I lived in the dorms. Of course I'd already left for the pub at that point, and I guess no one they asked knew where I'd gone. So they asked for my address instead. To make sure they didn't somehow miss me, the 3 of them went looking for my house while Ginger split off to cover more ground. However, they got lost along the way, either because Aisha or Norn got the street wrong, or because the person who'd explained the house's location had done so incorrectly. As they wandered the city, Rudeus picked up my footprints and followed them to our house. So that's what happened. I must convey my gratitude. Thank you.
There's no need to thank me.
I couldn't help but smile at his words. One of my greatest sources of pride was being recognized as a friend by this man. Anyway, you guys sure got here fast. The letter had only arrived last month. I'd thought it would take them 2 or 3 months to get here at the earliest.
Your little sister was eager.
Which one?
Aisha. It was thanks to her we were able to travel so quickly.
According to Rudeus, Aisha had proposed they accompany a merchant caravan so they could travel at night, too. Such caravans generally didn't accept outsiders, so Aisha offered them Rudeus and Ginger's services as guards in exchange for letting her and Norn ride along. It was a good deal, though. The negotiations hadn't been easy. Every time their current caravan reached its destination, they would move to the nearest town in search of another one. It was through this rapid changing of caravans that they were able to travel so efficiently. They would gather information on the caravan's schedules and locations, sometimes even retracing their steps to a previous town to hop on a caravan that suited them better. When the 3 of them asked Aisha why they had to double back, she said, "Because this way is faster. Amazing." That must have been rough for you, though. If you were moving around in the daytime and acting as a bodyguard at night, that means you had to be awake all the time.
It wasn't. I'm used to traveling continuously without rest and have been for a while now. But
But
it was the first time in a while that I felt like I was being ordered around.
he gave a thin smile as he said that. Perhaps he was recalling the time of the Laplace War. Aisha, that little stinker. Well, I'm not really sure what to say, but it seems my little sister caused you a great deal of...
It's just a funny story.
As usual, Ruijard was soft when it came to children. But even if he didn't mind it, we couldn't raise Aisha to be the kind of person that ordered people around. I'd have to give her a piece of my mind later. But she just slept like a log while you worked non-stop, didn't she?
She wasn't sleeping. She was constantly calculating our route, planning for us to travel in the most efficient way possible.
Okay, so she hadn't been making Ruijard do all the work. If that was the case, then I couldn't fault her.
She's still a child, though.
Aisha's gleeful no-breaks plan apparently didn't account for their stamina. Partway through the journey, she and Norn both collapsed from exhaustion. According to Aisha's internal schedule, she planned for them to arrive before winter, when the weather would make it difficult for them to travel. That was how they made it here faster than the letter suggested. Miss Ginger must have had a rough time of it as well. How was she?
She was actually quite happy with our pace. She said she wanted nothing more than to see His Majesty as quickly as possible.
There were a lot of people in this world with muscles for brains, it seemed. Ginger sure was a loyal one. She'd probably been reunited with Zanoba by now. How would she react when she saw Julie? I wished I could be there to see it.
She intends to resume serving the prince, apparently.
I see. By the way, how long do you plan to stay here? I asked nonchalantly. I assumed the answer would be about a week. It wouldn't take that long for me to introduce him to all of my friends. I was sure Zanoba would be delighted. Linnea and Prasenna would probably also have something to say. Who knew what Cliff would think? Ruijard and Badigadi might already be acquainted, actually. Those thoughts came to a crashing halt when I heard Ruijard's response.
I leave tomorrow.
That's quite soon.
I heard someone saw a devil deep in the woods to the east. I plan to check that out.
Ruijard had already sniffed out his next stop. I did think he could afford to stay a bit longer, but it would be insensitive of me to keep him.
Besides, I have no intention of getting in your way.
Of course not. You'd never be in my way. I would never treat him like a nuisance.
It's also a bit difficult to be here.
There was a loneliness to his voice. Perhaps it came as a bit of a shock that Eris and I weren't together. I didn't know exactly how Ruij felt, but if I were in his position, I might also find it a bit difficult to watch me cozying up so lovingly to Sylphie. I guess I can't blame you for that. It felt like a rift had formed in our friendship. Maybe Eris was the foundation that kept us together.
Rudeus.
I lifted my head when he called my name. Apparently, I'd averted my eyes at some point. Ruijard gave me a thin smile.
Don't make that face. I'll come back again.
It was all I could do to force a smile in return. I didn't regret the fact that I had married Sylphie. However, I did feel as if I'd made some kind of mistake. Here.
If I happen to meet Eris, I'll see what she has to say.
Please do, I replied, looking straight into his eyes. I found a gentle light burning within them. Soon after, Sylphie emerged from the bath. Norn apparently fell asleep mid-bath, while Aisha had been quite rambunctious in the water, but collapsed into sleep the moment she got out. Such was the relaxing effect of a bath. Warm water did wonders for an exhausted body. Thanks for doing all that.
Aisha seemed to remember me. She guessed who I was right away. Quite unlike someone else we both know.
Your hair is longer, you're not wearing sunglasses, and you're not in boys' clothes, so it doesn't count.
But Norn didn't seem to remember me.
It's rare for a 3- or 4-year-old to remember other neighborhood kids.
I guess?
Sylphie had changed the girls into pajamas and tucked them into the same bed. Talking to them would have to wait till tomorrow.
It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Wedded Greyrat.
Yeah, I'm real superior.
Sylphie and Rudeus awkwardly shook hands. They'd both suffered for their green hair in the past, though neither of them sported that color anymore. Rudeus had shaved it all off, while Sylphie's had turned white during the displacement incident.
Mr. Rudeus, what would you prefer in terms of a room?
Anything is fine.
Rudy, should we have him use the big room? He's an important guest, isn't he?
I didn't think Rudeus would be particularly concerned about the size of the room. Besides, he wouldn't use the bed, anyway. Sleep wherever you like. Think of our home as yours.
Yeah, I'll do that then. Well, I'm off to sleep.
Rudeus finished speaking, then stood up. All right, good night. Sylphie and I just stood there stiffly, listening as he moved through the house. Apparently, he'd entered the room where the children were sleeping. That lolicon bastard. Nah, just kidding. When we traveled together, he never took his eyes off of us even when we slept. That was just the kind of man he was. Besides, he'd let us hear his footsteps on purpose. If he were up to something suspicious, he would have silenced them and moved with stealth.
Did I do something to offend him?
Rudeus had been a bit curt. It seemed he had some conflicting feelings about my marriage to Sylphie after all. No, you haven't done anything wrong. He takes a bit to warm up to people he's just met. That's all.
If you're sure that's all it is.
Sylphie had a slightly wounded look. Let's go to bed, okay?
Okay.
I'd skipped dinner that night, but I wasn't even hungry. Oh, I should have at least provided Rudeus something to snack on, I thought, as I put out the fireplace and checked the lock on the front door. We already had the most useful security system in the house, but I still wanted to be safe. After turning off the lights, Sylphie and I headed up to the second floor together. Then we slipped into bed.
Let's, just skip today, okay?
Huh? Oh, yeah, sure. We held off on the sex that night, the first time we'd skipped for a reason other than her period. The next morning, I woke up in bed just as I always did. Sylphie was still asleep. Normally, she was curled into a ball using my arm as a pillow, but today she was using her own pillow and had a tense look on her face. Ordinarily, my affection for her came unbidden, together with a pinch of sexual desire, and I would reach out to touch her chest. Then, as I had that source of perfection nestled in the palm of my hand, a wave of bliss would wash over me. But I didn't feel that sensation today. Instead, I felt under the weather. It wasn't a good day for my rising dragon. I should have been happy since Rudeus was here, but it seemed Eris was really weighing on my mind. I felt gloomy and restless. Though I didn't feel too motivated, I decided to start my daily training. Anyway, I was sure that 5 minutes no, 10 minutes of exercise would perk me up. With that thought in mind, I stepped outside. A chilling scene awaited me. Someone else was already standing at our front entrance. Two towering figures, actually. One a bald warrior, a man who'd shaved his hair in order to hide its green hue. He wore none of the Arctic clothing common in the region, but was dressed in civvies bearing a lance. It was Rudeus. Then there was the other man. He had a large and brawny body, with skin as black as pitch and purple hair. Badigadi had his 6 arms folded together over his chest, giving off an immensely imposing aura as he stood in front of Rudeus. The chill in the air was intense, volatile. If someone lit a match, it might explode. Badigadi wasn't smiling, which was rare. In fact, he wore no expression at all. Rudeus had his back to me, so I couldn't see his face. Did this mean they knew each other after all? They'd both been alive since about the time of the Laplace War. One the captain of Laplace's Imperial Guard, the other in the moderate faction on the opposite side. Rudeus currently despised Laplace with all his heart, but back then, their circumstances had probably been quite different. Badigadi gave me a glance. Then he looked at Rudeus once more. So that's it, he nodded, apparently having satisfied his curiosity. Then, without saying anything more, he turned on his heel. The snow crunched beneath his feet as he disappeared into the distance. Rudeus silently glanced over his shoulder at me. He looked a bit anxious. It was a rare thing to see him in a cold sweat. Did something happen between you and King Body?
A long time ago.
I could infer the rest from his short reply. I'd heard the madness of the super tribe had led them to attack any who crossed their path, be they friend or foe, and that had to have included some of Badigati's people. Regardless of how uncommitted he was to ruling, he was still a king. I wondered what their relationship had been like after the war. I couldn't picture someone as optimistic as Badigati seeking revenge on the Supered. If anything, he'd probably championed the powerless citizens the Supered had hurt. Even if Laplace had been the cause of the Super's destructive tendencies, Rudeus had still killed people, and Badigati had gotten his revenge for it. I was sure that was it. No, wait! It was possible Badigati didn't know how or why what went down with the Super Tribe was Laplace's fault. I should talk to him about it next time we met. Come to think of it, how would he react if I told him that I plan to mass produce and sell Rudeus figurines in the future? Mr. Rudeus, just to be clear, that man has been good to me ever since he came to this city. I can only imagine what must have happened in the past, but...
Don't worry. I have no intention of fighting him.
Rudeus smiled stiffly as he said that, yet he'd clearly exhibited the intent to kill moments ago. If I hadn't come out when I did...
Still, I never thought I'd see him here of all places.
Apparently, he came here to see me.
Ah, well, that does fit his character.
Rudeus forced another smile before returning to the house. The whole encounter had thrown me for a loop. I would have thought cheerful, easygoing Badigati could get along with anyone. When I returned to the house, Sylphie was awake and preparing breakfast. Aisha, who had donned a maid outfit for some reason, was helping out as well. Norn appeared to still be asleep, intending to rouse her. I headed upstairs. I knocked on the door and immediately began reaching for the doorknob, but a sense of foreboding stopped me from opening it. Instead, I called out to her. "It's about time for breakfast, so please come downstairs." There was no answer, but when I strained to listen, I heard the rustling of clothes. Apparently, she was in the midst of changing. I'd avoided triggering a surprise naked scene. I wasn't a dull-witted protagonist anymore, after all.
Okay.
Once I heard her voice from behind the door, I felt relieved and returned to the first floor. The five of us ate breakfast together. Aisha seemed to have good table manners for her age and ate beautifully. As usual, Rudeus only used a fork. Norn, still looking half asleep, didn't eat very gracefully. Well, at least I could say she was using a fork. That was a step up from Eris, who just stabbed her meat with a knife and put it in her mouth.
Well then, it's time for me to be off.
As soon as our meal was finished, Rudeus prepared to depart. He had very little in the way of baggage, so he wasn't carrying much. The five of us set out for the city exit to see him off. Rudeus claimed that wasn't necessary, but it wasn't a problem of necessity. It was only natural to see a friend off. There wasn't much conversation as we walked. Eventually, Norn grabbed onto the hem of Rudeus' shirt, quiet enough it could almost go unnoticed. Rudeus, however, did notice and slowed his pace a bit. I eased up to match them. Norn didn't seem to want to part with Rudeus, and I understood the feeling. Perhaps I should beseech him to stay, after all. One night just wasn't enough to catch up, and there were people I wanted to introduce him to, and a mountain of things I wanted him to see. But the thought of Eris held me back, as expected. I didn't want to cause Rudeus discomfort. It wasn't any fault of Sylphie's. It was just that I felt like I couldn't really talk to Rudeus to Sylphie's, yet right now I didn't even know where she was. As I debated these things, we arrived at the city entrance.
Well then, stay safe.
You as well. Our goodbyes were short. There was so much I wanted to say. I just couldn't find the words in the moment. Well, it wasn't as if this was goodbye forever. I just had to talk to him again once things had calmed down more. As for Ginger, she had apparently already said her farewells to him yesterday.
Thank you for taking care of us.
Aisha cheerfully bowed. She surely understood her fast travel schemes would never have worked without Rudeus. That. I was sure Rudeus had protected them from dangers unbeknownst to them, too.
Aisha, don't demand too much of Rudeus.
Yes, I know.
Rudeus smiled stiffly and patted her on the head.
Mr. Reed.
Norn still hadn't let go of Reard's shirt. She had an anxious look that clearly said she didn't want him to go.
Don't worry, we'll meet again.
Ruijerd offered her a small smile as he rested his hand on her head. Seeing the two of them stirred up old memories. Back when I made that same anxious expression, Ruijerd would also stroke my head. Norn looked down, then lifted her face. She tried to say something, then pursed her lips. Her face contorted into several different expressions until she finally made up her mind.
I want to go with you.
Ruijerd looked troubled as he stroked her head, saying nothing. However, as the seconds passed, Norn's eyes quickly filled with tears.
Rely on Rudeus from now on, not me.
But I can't. He and Father...
That's in the past. He's already reflected on his actions. Your father did as well. I told you about the hardship he'd been through as we traveled. Even you accepted that.
But yesterday he was drunk, and he's with a different girl this time than he was last time. I can't trust him.
The air around us seemed to grow chill when she said that, though maybe it was just my imagination. After all, I had already told Sylphie about Eris. It wasn't cheating, and it wasn't as if I were trying to be a playboy, though that probably wasn't how it looked to Norn. Ruijerd looked at me and then Sylphie before forcing a smile.
That's just the way of things between men and women. It happens. It absolutely doesn't mean your brother is disloyal.
He took his hand away from her head.
Over there, you? Will you tell me your name one more time?
Oh, yes. I'm Sophiette.
Sylphiette, I leave these two and Rudeus in your care.
Oh, of course.
Ruijerd finally exchanged words with Sylphie at the very end. His feelings toward her were surely complicated, but I prayed he held no ill will.
Well, then, let's meet again.
I watched him go until I couldn't see him anymore. There was a time when I'd watched as his figure receded into the distance, filled with gratitude toward him. I was sure that right now, Aisha and Norn felt the same. Side story, the sharpening of fangs. On a nameless cape, just an hour's journey on foot north of the Sword Sanctum, a lone girl was swinging her sword, a simple swing with no technique that belonged to the sword god's style or anything else. The girl's name was Rudeus Greyrat. Rudeus Greyrat mindlessly swung her sword. There in that space, all by herself, with no other soul around, just mindlessly swinging. A swing weighed down by idle thoughts was a meaningless one. A swing that merely mimicked the motions of others was meaningless too. But if your sword was pure, empty of thought, then each swing would sharpen your skills. She would keep honing her abilities, cutting away slice by thin slice until the way before her was clear enough that she could see through to the other side. Each slash made her that much stronger. How much more repetition was required? Just how long would she have to continue before she'd reach Orsted's level? Eris didn't know. No one did. Perhaps she would never be able to reach that level, no matter how hard she worked.
Such thoughts were exactly the meaningless kind she was supposed to avoid. Tesk.
Eris clicked her tongue. She shook her head and sat down to think. It was annoying. She wanted to defeat Orsted, but the more she thought about it, the further he seemed to get from her. At one point, her master Ghislaine had told her, think. Eris, however, was bad at thinking. No matter how much she racked her brain, she couldn't produce an answer that satisfied her. Compared to that, her second teacher, Ruijerd, had been much better. Do you understand? He would ask. He would knock her down, then just ask whether she understood or not. Over and over again, he would keep going until she finally got it. Without her having to use her head as if they were equals, Eris respected Ghislaine. She also respected Ruijerd. Frustratingly, the sword god's teachings combined the good parts of both of the people she respected. He had ordered her thusly, just swing your sword without thinking. Don't think, just swing. And when you get tired, then think. When you're tired of thinking, stand back up and swing again. So she did just that. She swung, sat. When she got hungry, she ate. Then she repeated the process of swinging her blade and sitting all over again. At first, she did this at the training hall. When she did that, however, someone would inevitably get in her way. The usual culprits were other girls from the training hall. They would say, "Hey, we're doing fighting practice this morning, join us." Or, "Hey, food is ready, so come eat." Or, "Hey, can you train with me a bit?" Or, "Hey, you stink, go take a bath." Things of that sort. It had become so annoying that Eris just left the training hall. She left and continued walking until she found an unoccupied bit of land and started practicing there. She ate what she'd brought with her from the training hall's kitchen, or whenever monster occasionally tried to attack her. When it was cold outside, she fetched logs from the training hall and used magic to light them for warmth. When she got tired, she would return to the training hall and sleep as much as she wanted. This had been her daily life for the past 6 months.
There was one thing that Eris did understand. Mastering the sword was difficult. When she was younger, she thought swordplay so much simpler and more suited to her than studying. Well, that part was still true. Swordplay suited her far better than book learning ever had, but it definitely wasn't simple at all. In fact, you might even say book learning was simpler as long as you had someone else teaching you. All she did was raise her sword and bring it back down again. Yet for some reason, she couldn't get good at it. She should be able to raise it faster. She should be able to strike faster. But she hadn't managed to achieve her desired speed. She had to be faster now than she had been 6 months ago, but Ghislaine was still faster. The sword god was faster. And Orsted, of course, was faster. In Orsted, of course, their adventures. She tried to recall the way they fought the sword god Rudeus and Orsted. How had they each moved? She tried to imitate their movements from the tips of their fingers to their shoulders, all the cells in their body. Then she tried to go beyond that to transcend them, except she didn't know how. There was no way she could. Eris was bad at thinking.
Once she was exhausted by the endless cycle of thoughts running through her head, she stood back up and started practicing her swings again. She swung without thinking about anything. Up, down, faster, up, down, faster. She went through 10 repetitions, 100, then 1,000. When she did, idle thoughts began to filter in again. That happened when she got tired.
Ch, ch.
She clicked her tongue once, then took a seat. Her hands hurt. Blisters had broken open on them. She produced cloth from her pocket and disinterestedly wrapped it around her hands. It hurt, but it wasn't painful. She could always recall what happened 3 years ago with the red worm's lower jaw. Compared to that, she felt like she could withstand anything. Pain meant nothing to her. Not the ache in her hand, not her frustration, not even the fact that she was by herself right now, without him by her side. Not even the fact that she was by herself right now, without him by her side. Not even the fact that she was by herself right now, without him by...
Rudeus.
She breathed out his name. Eris didn't think about it any further. She was bad at thinking. She also wasn't very good at staying positive. The more she thought, the more she realized she could break.
3 years. She thought she'd gotten stronger, but it still wasn't enough.
Eris stood up and started swinging her sword again. Tamping down her drowsiness, Eris headed back to the training hall. At its entrance stood a man she didn't recognize, a striking man at that. His robes were dyed in rainbow hues, and below them he wore only knee-length boots, with 4 swords at his waist. On his cheek was a peacock tattoo, and his hair was gathered up in a style that fanned open at the top like a parabola. When he spotted Eris, he bowed his head slightly and attempted to greet her.
I am the North and...
Move!
Eris spoke a single word to the man standing between her and the training hall. She did not care to say anything more. She'd sharpened herself to her very limits with all the swinging she'd done. The glint in her eye as she glared was that of an aggressive beast. Murderous intent swelled from her like an all-consuming blaze. She was a wild animal that wouldn't let anyone come close.
What?
The man immediately drew his sword.
You're in my way.
Eris took a step forward as she spoke. To her, the man before her was nothing but an obstacle, one standing between her and her nest.
Wait, what in the world is this creature?
At first, the man didn't even understand that words had come out of her mouth. For a moment, all he saw was a starved beast looking for a meal. Then Eris drew a blade of her own, and he finally realized she was human, and a sword fighter at that.
You may refer to me as Aber, the Peacock Blade. I see that you are a student of the Sword God style. Might I request that you guide me to meet with the Sword God?
I told you to move.
Irritated, Eris took another step forward. She was telling him to get out of her way. However, those words didn't register with the man called Ober. The only thing that did was Eris's murderous intent, that and the realization that talking was pointless. With that, Ober with one sword in his right hand reached for the shorter sword at his waist with his left. However, he wielded his weapon in reverse, brandishing the flat side of the blade at her. At striking distance, Eris decided she would remove the obstacle in her path by force. Shket! Her blade whizzed through the air. She was using Sword of Light, an ability honed through all of her practice. A normal opponent had no hope of countering the Sword God style's most lethal technique. That was only if they were a normal opponent, however. Abra gripped both swords in his hands and used them to brush off the attack. Eris had perceptively anticipated his reaction and was now swinging her blade back in the opposite direction. Eris's sword was stopped by the one in Abra's left hand. She was using two hands to wield hers, where he was using only one, but he easily deflected her attack. Her blade slid off to the side, merely clipping the edge of his hair. Eris's body followed the momentum of her blade, causing her to stumble on her pivoting foot. At that exact second, Abra's right hand flew toward her exposed neck. Eris discarded her sword and dropped to the ground in a crouch. Abra's weapon plowed through the empty space where she'd just been. Eris moved like a cat, flipping herself back over. She was trying to retrieve her sword. Abra kicked her weapon away and it vanished into the snow. Normally, that would be the end of the match. But Eris didn't stop. The moment she realized her sword was lost, she flew at Ober with her fists instead. Abra slammed the center of his blade against her cheek with enough force to shatter her cheekbone. It left a single cut on her face. However, even after that, Eris still didn't stop.
Grah!
She swung at his jaw. Auber tried to stop her by using the weapon in his left hand.
Mister!
Her hand tangled with his, her fingers hooked around the hilt. Auber felt a chill run down his spine as he realized she was trying to steal his sword from him. This beast wouldn't stop until he killed it. He gave the woman coiled around him a hard kick, sending her hurtling through the air. Then he readjusted his grip on his weapon, so the blade was now facing her. Luckily for Eris, when he launched her through the air, she fell right where her sword had landed earlier. Her breathing was uneven as she took up the weapon. She had to kill him. It was then as Ober wielded his blade in earnest and began emitting a murderous intent of his own, that a voice suddenly cut in.
That's enough.
The bloodlust ended. Eris was already frozen in place, having sensed the change in demeanor from her opponent. The sword god had appeared without them realizing and was now standing at the entrance of the training hall. Auber put away his sword and Eris flopped down on her back. She stared at the sky, still breathing hard. Her face was twisted in frustration. Auber put his right hand to his chest and bowed his head.
It has been too long, Master Sword God.
So you came North Emperor.
I read your letter, and then that girl attacked.
Ah, incredible, isn't she?
It's the first time I've seen a sword fighter that relentless. She was almost like a beast. Ah, so this is the child they refer to as the Mad Dog.
Eris listened to their conversation as she stood up. The way she drifted unsteadily forward made her look unearthly. Seeing her, Auber readied his sword again. But Eris just glowered at him and entered the training hall, vanishing into the building without a second glance at the man who was left dumbfounded in her wake. She wiped at the wound on her cheek as she headed down the hall toward her room, not bothering to brush off the snow clinging to her body. Then, when she got to her destination, she threw her sword at the base of her pillow and sagged down onto the hard bed. Just like that, she fell fast asleep. She was frustrated at her loss, but right now, that was a trivial matter. That evening, Ghislaine visited the ephemeral hall. Seated within were the sword god Galfarian and his guest, the North Emperor Ober. Ghislaine's brows were slightly furrowed, but she showed no outward sign of paying Auber any attention as she tromped over to the sword god and bluntly asked,
Master, why aren't you teaching Eris anything?
The sword god listened and chuckled.
Already did, didn't I?
How to swing her sword, you mean?
No. How to temper herself.
He answered as if it were obvious. The normal roughness in his voice was absent. A quiet response. Ghislaine didn't care much for that side of him. That was why she rounded up what smarts she had and chose her words carefully.
You always said it yourself. Do everything logically.
I did.
So what are you doing with Eris? She's out there swinging her sword every day like an idiot who doesn't know anything else. What part of that is logical?
Since when did you become such a nag?
Since before I came back here.
So you ain't gonna listen to what your master tells you anymore.
But...
Ghislaine suddenly had a sword thrust at her. To an ordinary person, it would have seemed as if the weapon just magically appeared in the sword god's hand. Ghislaine, however, could see him unsheath it. She just wasn't able to react in time. In the face of the fastest man in the world, no one could, not even a sword king.
Ghislaine, you know I kinda regret the way I taught you. You used to be like a starved tiger, but now you're like a kitten that's lost its fangs. If you'd have stayed the way you were, you'd be a sword emperor by now.
Ghislaine swallowed hard at his words. She did feel she'd gotten weaker recently, though she didn't think it was all bad. It was true that her growth with the sword had stagnated. Still, she'd gained Mushoku Tensei Vol10 Extra Chapter by Raifujin Namagane, cast by Artale Studio. If you are interested in creating your own audio drama like this, please visit artale.ai and use promotion code ARTALE to activate your account. Now, enjoy the story. Important things in exchange, intelligence, and wisdom. Things she wouldn't have been able to get from mastering the sword.
I'm not gonna let Eris lose her fangs too.
Gal put his sword away as if to say, "Now you understand, don't you?"
I don't understand. Why won't you have her train?
The sword god heaved a sigh, recalling that Ghislaine was the kind of child who needed thorough explanations to understand.
Listen, if someone wants to get better than me, they gotta be able to figure stuff out for themselves. That was how I got to where I am after all. Of course, they'll need the requisite amount of talent and hard work to deserve the title, Sword God. But let's leave that aside. Eris's objective is the dragon god Orsted. His existence defies logic. He's a monster beyond imagination. She cannot beat him with my teachings alone.
The man had a nostalgic look on his face as he finished speaking. He had actually fought the dragon god himself back before he was called the sword god, back when he was just a strong yet arrogant sword saint. He lost miserably to the point where he still wasn't sure why his life had been spared, or more importantly, why all of his limbs were still intact. Having had his ego beat out of him, he'd made surpassing Orsted his goal, and had trained to that effect ever since. That was how he became the sword god. That was also exactly why he didn't want anyone else butting their head into this matter.
Hey, Ghislaine, doing drills isn't the same thing as training, you know? Especially if you have something you're aiming for. There's no point in acting like an obedient dog and doing whatever someone else tells you. You get it?
Master, you always say such complicated things. I don't understand.
That's right. This idiot won't understand if I don't explain it all clearly. In other words, it means just learning from me won't do her any good. That's why I've prepared a bunch of stuff for her, beginning with him.
The sword god gestured at Albert, who in turn dipped his chin in greeting.
I am North Emperor Aber Corbett. On the streets, they refer to me as the Peacock Blade.
Ghislaine screwed up her face. There was an indescribable stench wafting off of the man. It wasn't body odor, but something powerfully citrusy, most likely cologne. An unpleasant scent for beast folk like Ghislaine.
And what is someone from the North God style doing here?
Responding to the sword god's request that I instruct one of his pupils.
Her expression turned more suspicious as she questioned the sword god.
Why someone from the North God style? I don't see how their underhanded tricks would suit Eris.
Because the dragon god will use them against her.
The doubt on Ghislaine's face only deepened. She had never heard anything about the dragon god being the swordsman of the North god style.
Just who is this dragon god?
Hell if I know. What I do know is that he's got every move from the Sword God style, North God style, all those schools of sword fighting in his arsenal. Naturally, that means he can use them, and will be able to counter any used against him. You gotta learn them as well, 'cause if you don't, you won't be fighting on even footing.
Ghislaine's expression lost its sharp edge. Learning the techniques that your opponent would use against you, that was logical.
I see. Then eventually you'll be summoning someone from the water god style as well.
Yep. Already sent a letter.
Is that right?
Her tail wagged happily. The sword god smiled wryly at that. Ghislaine would be satisfied as long as the answer was something she could easily understand. That part of her never changed.
Well then, Master North Emperor, I hope you have a relaxing stay here.
Now that Ghislaine's doubts had been dispelled, she stood up and paid her respects to the North Emperor. She got down on one knee, as was the unique etiquette of the sword god style.
Indeed, Master Sword King. I hope that we can have an amicable relationship during my time here.
Aber also put a hand to his chest and returned the gesture. With that, Eris's training moved on to the next stage. A year later, she would be recognized as a North Saint. Extra chapter: the Master Babysitter. Approximately 1 year before Rudeus received the letter from his father, Paul's group had arrived in Eastport with Roxy and Talland accompanying them. They had already discovered that Zenith was in the labyrinth city of Rapan on the Greyrat continent. They would have to take a ship from Eastport in order to get there, but there was one thing weighing on Paul's mind. His daughters, Norn and Aisha. Beasts roamed the Greyrat continent in vast numbers, and it was said to be as dangerous a land as the Demon continent in vast numbers. Paul was a former adventurer. While he had spent a transient period as a drunkard, he had continued training even after his retirement. Throw experienced adventurers like Tallhand and Roxy in the mix, and they'd have no trouble traversing the Greyrat continent, if it was just him and the other adults. Bringing along 2 young children along would be an entirely different kettle of fish. Thus, Paul chose to send his 2 girls to stay with Rudeus. This had its own dangers, but he determined it was preferable to dragging them to a beast-infested continent. 4 girls occupied a table in the dining hall of an inn: Lilia, Norn, Aisha, and Roxy. One of them was an adult, while 2 were young children. The last of their group looked like a child herself, but was actually a full-fledged adult.
I don't want to.
One among their number, Norn, was sulking. She carved up the food on her plate with her fork, but refused to carry it to her mouth.
I'm going with father.
The reason for this dour mood was obvious. During breakfast, her father had announced, Aisha and Norn will be going to live with Rudeus. Norn had been unable to disguise her displeasure ever since. Even as they ate lunch, cheeks puffed up in a pout.
I'm telling you once again, you'll just be in father's way if you go with him.
No, I won't.
Aisha was the one bumping heads with her. Unlike Norn, Aisha had pumped her fist in celebration when she heard they were going to stay with Rudeus, which was also why she couldn't stand Norn's discontented grumbling putting a damper on things. As a result, she had been relentlessly criticizing Norn while trying to make herself sound reasonable and convincing.
Aisha had no problems with selfish demands, but if her sister wanted those selfish demands to be met, she should go about it more intelligently. She had to do it in a way that made those around her think they had actually won. Instead, she grew irritable watching Norn pointlessly quibble by repeating the same line over and over. I don't want to, it was disgraceful.
You just don't want to go stay with our big brother, isn't it? You're treating him like he's some awful person just because he had a little fight with her father a long time ago. Even father himself said that he was in the wrong.
He wasn't!
Norn suddenly burst out. There was no doubt in her mind that the fight between Rudeus and Paul had been Rudeus' fault. Norn wouldn't accept anything else.
You're always like that. As soon as things aren't going your way, you start pouting and whining. You wait for everyone else around you to give in, and if anyone says anything you don't like, you yell at them. How idiotic!
Norn clenched her teeth. She could do nothing but glare at her younger sister as tears sprang to her eyes. However, it wasn't just Norn glaring at Aisha. So was the grown woman beside her.
Aisha, how dare you speak that way? Apologize immediately.
The woman in question was Lilia, currently in charge of watching the two girls while Paul searched for a ship and a knowledgeable guide. These sisterly arguments were a daily occurrence. Paul had more or less given up on mediation, looking exasperated as he acknowledged, well, they're sisters, so they're going to fight. He did still step in and scold Aisha when she began spouting too many foul words. Roxy sat beside them, looking a bit uncomfortable at the exchange. In the past, she'd worked as a live-in tutor for the Greyrat family. She also knew Lilia well, but that didn't make this an easy place for her to be right now.
Yes, ma'am. I am sorry, Miss Norn, for getting carried away.
Aisha looked entirely unconcerned as she recited her apology. Her words were polite, as was her tone, but it was an apology in name only. Even Lilia understood that Aisha hadn't truly reflected on her actions at all. If she had, then she wouldn't lash out at Norn at every opportunity.
She wanted to tell her daughter that she should be paying more respect to the daughter of Paul's legitimate wife, but didn't know to convey the sentiment in words. But that wasn't the only reason why Lilia refrained from pressing Aisha further. Her daughter was right this time. Miss Norn, the Bigaret continent is an incredibly dangerous land. Of course the master will act cautiously and do as much as he can to ensure your safety. However, mistakes do happen. If you were to get injured as a result, I am sure it would cause him immeasurable grief.
Even Norn understood that meant she would be in the way. But that just didn't matter to her. As far as she was concerned, being with her father was the safest and securest place for her to be. No one else would protect her. She couldn't leave his side. I don't want to.
Miss Norn, don't say that. Please try to understand.
I'm saying it because I don't want it. I want to go with him to where my mother is. You're going with him too, Miss Lilia. That's not fair.
She slammed her hands down on the table and stood up. Her plate fell and shattered, scattering her uneaten food across the wooden floor.
Miss Norn, enough is enough. Be reasonable.
Lilia's voice grew louder. She knew her place in the master-servant relationship, and she cared deeply for Norn, but she knew when to discipline her too. Norn flinched, but soon fixed the woman with a glare, balled her fists and yelled.
I've had enough.
She kicked her chair over and dashed out of the dining hall.
Ah, Miss Norn, please wait.
Lilia chased after the girl as she disappeared outside. Roxy also scrambled after the two, but it was too late. By the time they emerged from the inn, the petite Norn had already disappeared into the crowd. Norn ran through an undulating mass of people, her eyes full of tears threatening to spill at any moment. She was frustrated, irritated, and she felt pathetic.
This wasn't the first time that things hadn't gone the way she'd wanted them. Quite the opposite. Things rarely ever went her way. Even so, despite all that, she still wanted to remain with Paul. It was the only thing she wanted. She'd withstood every outrageous thing that had happened to them all this time just for that reason. Of course she would make selfish demands at times, but generally she abstained from doing so. Ever since the displacement incident this entire time, she thought that being with Paul was her absolute right. Now they were trying to steal even that from her.
Hick! Norn couldn't help but cry. As she wiped her tears, she turned the corner and collided with someone.
What?
The person she'd run into cried out as something fell out of their hand. Norn peered up to find a stout, bearded man with a dumbfounded look on his face. Beside him was a slender fellow whose eyes were wide in astonishment. Saw stained the bearded man's chest. At Norn's feet was the skewer he must have dropped. As the man took in the scene before him, his face grew red, while Norn's grew pale.
Hey, you little brat. Where do you think you're walking?
Eek!
He grabbed her by her shirt collar and hoisted her in the air, his scruffy face pressed in close, his breath washing over her. It smelled of alcohol. He was drunk.
Norn trembled in fear. She knew well what drunk people did. She'd seen Paul drunk often enough when he was running from his problems. Although his anger was never directed at her, it was still enough for young Norn to understand. Drunk people are terrifying. Drinking is bad. She'd accepted the fact that Paul couldn't function without his liquor, but her father was the only exception.
What are you gonna do to make up for this, huh? Pay up.
Yeah, that was Boss's favorite snack.
You moron! I'm talking about my clothes and this stain. I'm not going to be able to get it out.
Abba, hick.
Norn could only tremble and sob when faced with their intimidation, struggling to tamp down the overwhelming terror that threatened to make her wet her pants. She cast a pleading gaze around in hopes that someone would help. Heartlessly, no one stopped to look at her. None were eager to involve themselves with a quarrelsome drunkard, and they were all quick to distance themselves from the scene.
Now tell me where your mom or dad is. You gotta speak so I can get an answer. You aren't even going to apologize. Were you raised by animals?
Wait. There was someone, a person who met her desperate gaze, heard her apology, and stopped moving. His expression contorted in anger as he stomped up to the bearded man.
Who the hell are you?
The passerby grabbed the man's arm, the one keeping Norn suspended in the air. He had such strength in his grip. The bearded man's arm was almost as thick as a normal person's torso, and yet the passerby twisted it back like there was no resistance at all.
Ow! Ouch! Ouch! Ouch!
Unable to withstand the pressure, the bearded man relinquished his grip on Norn. She landed on her butt, looking up at the man who had saved her.
Explain. Just what did this girl do to you?
The passerby was wearing a forehead protector. A scar ran diagonally across his face, which was now twisted in anger. Had his hair and gem been visible, he would have been instantly recognizable as Rudeus Superior. Norn, of course, had no idea who he was. However, the moment she saw his face, she instantly stood and ducked behind him.
Thid, that brat just ran into me out of nowhere, and now my shirt.
She apologized.
That apology isn't going to get the stain out. Ouch!
Rudeus strengthened his grip on the man's arm, which strained audibly under the pressure.
You bastard! Let go of the boss!
The thin man tried to grab Rudeus' face, but the latter easily sidestepped him, and the man's fingers just barely grazed his headband.
Give up on the stain or give up on living. Which will it be?
Ow! 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 I'm sorry. It's my fault. I'm the one in the wrong.
Rudeus released him. The smaller man quickly ran to the bearded one's side, asking, "Are you all right?"
You apologize again.
Norn looked shocked for a moment, then quickly nodded and bowed at her accuser.
I'm sorry.
It's fine. It was my fault for...
Roger that, boss?
The two men disappeared into the crowd. Norn slowly slid to the ground. All the strength in her body fled when the cloud of fear finally lifted, and a wave of relief swept in.
You all right?
Oh, yes.
Norn looked up at Rudeus. Her gaze was a mixture of surprise and familiarity. She remembered him. Back when she lived in Milishian, before either Aisha or Lilia had joined them, she'd almost tripped, and he had extended his hand to help her. He'd patted her head so gently and even given her an apple. There was no way she could forget him, the bald man with a forehead protector and large scar on his face. The relief broke the floodgates, and though it was shameful for someone of her age, she burst into tears. Rudeus panicked when he saw her crying. Other passers-by were staring, and because of his frightening appearance, no one would approach them. After hesitating, Rudeus crouched down and put a hand on Norn's head and softly stroked it. The warmth of his hand and the way he handled her as gently as porcelain brought Norn such comfort that her sobbing began to quiet.
They were so cruel, all of them, telling me no, that I'd be in the way.
For a short while after that, Norn went quiet, though she continued to sniffle. Rudeus thought it best to return her to her father as quickly as possible, but when he mentioned it, she shook her head firmly. Rudeus thought that there might be some issue between her and Paul, so he decided instead to hear out her side of the story. After hearing all of the details, Rudeus tightened his grip on his spear. Norn's story was one-sided and lacked adequate explanation. As a result, there were several things that required further clarification. The main points, however, were clear enough that Rudeus could infer the rest, and he could understand Norn's desire to be with her father.
That must be tough. Rudeus knew what it was like to be a father, At one point, he'd had a child and wife of his own, back then serving in Laplace's Imperial Guard. He'd traveled across the demon continent. He left them both behind to fight, driven by a mix of ambition and loyalty. He hadn't left them behind because they'd get in the way of satisfying those desires, but because they were so precious to him that he wanted them to stay somewhere safe. When he'd first left his village, his son still had a tail attached to his body. That was at the beginning of the war, though. Rudeus fought in Laplace's personal guard for many years. As he won battles and they began to unify the demon continent, his son grew up. His tail became a spear, his body became muscular, and he became a magnificent young man. He'd grown enough that when Rudeus returned to his village for the last time, his son approached him and arrogantly insisted, "I'm an adult now. Take me with you to your next battle." Back then, his son hadn't the mind to heed anything his father said to him. So Rudeus instead used his strength to force his son to back down. "If this is all you are capable of, then you're not a warrior yet in my eyes," he'd told his son before he left. It was a common mindset among warriors. They tried to keep their loved ones far from battle to protect them. But ultimately, Rudeus was the one who had been unworthy as a warrior. His son had been the true warrior. It was his son, after all, who defeated Rudeus when the demonic spear he wielded made him go berserk. It was his son who saved the other warriors. Rudeus still didn't know how his son had been able to defeat him back then. He roamed the whole of the demon continent carrying that question, but he'd never found a satisfying answer. Now, however, he had an idea. His son had surely worked hard to become stronger in ways his father never knew about. He'd followed his father's instructions and had trained himself with purpose and determination in order to protect both his mother and his village. Rudeus felt such pride.
If Norn felt the same way, then she wouldn't listen, no matter how much Paul told her that he was worried or that she was precious to him. If only she were a little bit older, a little bit stronger. If only she had that same sense of purpose and determination and had spent her days training. If she were as capable as Rudeus, then Rudeus would have tried to persuade Paul to take her. Presently, though, Norn was just young and frail.
Norn?
Yes?
Rudeus looked into the eyes of the girl sitting beside him.
You need to get stronger.
Huh?
If you want to be with someone, you have to get bigger, stronger, more impressive. In order to get there, you're going to have to bear with your circumstances right now.
His words were clumsy. He wasn't conveying what he wanted to very clearly, but Norn understood. Strange as it was, she found meaning in his words. They resonated differently from what Lilia, Aisha, and the other adults had said to her before, perhaps because Rudeus came from a place of positivity rather than negativity. Norn pursed her lips and looked downwards. In response, Rudeus just smiled and reached his hand out. He stroked her head softly.
Don't worry, I'll protect you in your father's stead until you get there.
The way he touched her was so gentle that it was more than enough to reassure her. After a long silence, she spoke up in a thin voice.
Okay.
Satisfied, Rudeus started to lift his hand away.
Ah!
He stopped when Norn exclaimed,
What is it?
Please pet my head a little longer.
Rudeus obliged her. Norn curled in on herself to hold her body perfectly still as he caressed her hair softly, as if he were stroking a baby chick.
It feels kind of comforting.
I see.
Rudeus continued rubbing her head for a short while after that. It was a pleasant sight for anyone who looked upon the two of them. Even Norn's puffy, tear-covered face finally lit into a smile.
Ah, there she is. Miss Lilia? I found her.
From the side of the plaza came a voice. They spotted a young girl with blue hair trying to hold down the hat on her head as she ran toward them.
Looks like they're here for you.
He dropped his hand to his side and stood up. Norn felt a bit sad as his warmth disappeared. She followed him and stood as well. He had already turned his back toward her, but she called out to him in a loud voice.
Please tell me your name.
He glanced over his shoulder. The knot in his headband had loosened during their exchange with the two men earlier, and now came completely undone. As it fell away, it revealed a ruby-like gem on his forehead.
Ruigerd superior.
It was a scene straight from a fantasy novel. A man with a beautiful jewel on his forehead, illuminated by sunlight from behind, a smile on his face as he looked directly at her. In that moment, Norn felt like a fairy tale princess whose knight had come to rescue her. In the same moment, Ruigerd made another, completely different impact on another girl who'd heard him state his name, Roxy Migardia. To describe the gravity of this impact will require a bit of explanation.
There were 3 things Roxy hated as a child, the first of which was green peppers. It was the first vegetable she ate when she arrived on the Miller's continent. Back then she'd thought that the human world was heaven, full of only sweet confections, and that green peppers had been a messenger from hell, sent to drag her to the abyss. She could still remember the unique scent and bitter taste that spread through her mouth when she ate it. How she'd immediately spat it out, only to still feel nauseous. The green pepper is poison to the Migard tribe, she'd once seriously thought. She'd conquered that fear during her time as Rudeus's home tutor, however, embarrassed by the thought of being picky about her food in front of him. The second thing she hated was children. Human children between 5 to 15 years of age, specifically, especially males. They didn't listen, they acted hastily based on their whims and wouldn't heed logic. Upon meeting Rudeus, she'd begun to think maybe she actually did like kids after all. Eventually she realized the problem wasn't that she hated children. Rather, she hated people who didn't listen. In a way, she'd conquered her hatred of children as well. The third thing she hated was the super tribe. She'd heard stories of them countless times from the time she was still a baby. They were a devilish tribe, involved in a war long before she was born, that had betrayed its allies. It was said they'd had connections with the Migard tribe long ago, but were persecuted as traitors and driven to ruin. The Superd held a strong grudge against those who turned against them, and as soon as they spotted a demon from another tribe, they would attack and kill them. Of all the Superd, Dead End was the one best known among children. As legend had it, when he found a child who'd misbehaved, he would come in and steal them while everyone was sleeping and carry them off to his lair. Then he would eat their legs so they couldn't run, eat their arms so they couldn't resist, and then slowly start eating their stomachs, saving their heads for last to keep them fresh. That was why you had to be well behaved. Such were the stories she'd been raised on. Back when she'd first left her village and became a novice adventurer, she'd seriously thought she was in danger because she'd been so ill-behaved. Gradually that anxiety had faded as she grew into an adult, but her fear of the Super tribe remained. That was why she was on such high alert when she discovered someone was calling themselves Dead End in Windport. Now, several years later, she'd run into someone from the Super tribe, just as she'd been running around the city looking for Norn, and finally thought she'd found the girl.
The person before her was the same bald man she'd spotted at Windport. He had a chalk-white, 3-pronged spear in his hand. In the next second, his headband fell away, exposing the red jewel lying beneath. And he called himself Superdidia. For some reason, he didn't have any hair, but there was no doubt in her mind that he was a Super the Dead End, and he was moments away from sinking his teeth into Norn. Fear gripped Roxy, starting at the base of her feet and rising upward. Shivers raced through her body, and she felt like she might release her grip on consciousness right then and there. However, she had been entrusted with the task of protecting Norn. Lilia was sprinting up behind her. There was also Aisha back at the inn as well. No, it wasn't just them. Everyone in this plaza was in danger. Roxy's heart screamed at her, forcing her to steel herself and hold her staff.
Bellette, let go. If you refuse, I shall be your opponent.
Silence fell. Ruigerd grew stiff, and Lilia froze. Norn actually clung to Ruigerd, glaring with hostility in Roxy's direction.
Roxy realized something was off, but her extreme anxiety stopped her from figuring out what it was. Still, she got a distinct sense that she was making a mistake right now. She'd made many up until this point, so she knew the feeling well. Lord Roaird, it has been a while,
said Lilia, bowing as she strode up from behind Roxy.
You know him?
Haven't you heard? Lord Regerd is the one who escorted Lord Rudeus back to the Asura kingdom.
Oh.
She had heard. In fact, she'd even heard that the dead end she saw in Windport was the very same one who'd escorted Rudeus. But she'd never honestly believed that he was an actual Superd.
I have no intention of hurting her,
Rudeus said, warily gazing over at Roxy as she brandished her staff. Roxy realized she'd completely misunderstood the situation. Her face turned bright red as she averted her gaze to her feet.
She really did hate the Superd tribe.
Roussard would escort the girls to Rudeus. When Paul's group heard the news, their reactions were mixed. Lilia and Ginger, who knew his true strength and character, gave the plan their seal of approval, saying they could be assured that the girls would arrive safely if Rudeus was the one escorting them. Vieira and Shara both exchanged looks and nodded as if to say, why not? They knew Rudeus was the one who had protected Rudeus as he traversed the demon continent. He was strong enough to be reliable as well, so they saw no problems with it. Talon was against the plan. Just like Roxy, he had grown up with scary stories about the Super Tribe and heard anecdotes about how their atrocities when he traveled the demon continent. There was no smoke without a fire. Talon had no doubt in his mind that Rudeus had done something terrible in the past. Even if he were on the path to redemption now, that didn't mean he could be trusted with a complete stranger's loved ones. Roxy was partially against it. She knew she shouldn't judge people based on appearances or preconceived notions. It was just that this was the Super Tribe they were talking about. Even after she understood that Rudeus didn't present them any danger, she still remained cautious. No, cautious wasn't the right word. She was afraid. The Super Tribe was the embodiment of the fear she felt as a child, hearing all those stories. Even though her village no longer told such stories about the Super Tribe, they'd been the best common way of disciplining children when she was young. That was why she couldn't fully mask her terror. Although she intellectually understood that it was safe, the fear that had been instilled in her as a child still froze her in place and made her wary.
If you really think you can trust him, then go ahead.
So there were 4 opinions. Strongly for, partially for, against, and partially against. Paul considered them all. He didn't know Rudeus that well. The only time he'd had any contact with the man was when Rudeus appeared alongside Rudeus, and even then, they'd hardly talked. At the time, he'd gotten the impression that Rudeus was trustworthy. However, it had been several years since then, enough to change a person. Paul knew this from personal experience. Heck, it didn't require several years, a single day was all it might take. Thus the question, could Paul really trust Rudeus? Could he entrust him with the girls? As he weighed the decision in his head, he looked downwards. There, clinging to Rudeus' leg, was Norn. For a moment it was as if he were seeing double an image of himself with Norn clinging to his leg superimposed over his vision. Norn was so shy with people that she hadn't warmed up to any adults other than him. Despite that, there she was leaning against Rudeus as if he were her father instead. Then again, Rudeus was the one who saved her. When that drunk came at her and she was crying desperate for help, Rudeus had stepped in as if it were his duty. No doubt it was much the same when he stepped in to save Rudeus as well. He moved without consideration for the consequences. Most likely he hadn't changed at all.
Can I trust you with them?
The words left Paul's mouth before he even realized he was speaking. Rudeus immediately returned his gaze.
Even if it costs me my life, I will deliver them to Rudeus.
His reply was both sincere and encouraging. Reflected in Rudeus' eyes was a sense of duty and determination. He had the face of a warrior, one earned over many moons, something that Paul didn't possess. If this was deception, then Paul didn't know what was real anymore.
Then I'll leave it to you.
Paul extended a hand. Rudeus took it and they exchanged a firm handshake. That was how Rudeus became Norn and Aisha's bodyguard.